Welcome to another edition of the RF Video Shoot interview series. Today we're joined by none other than No Gimmicks Needed, Chris Candido.
Hello.
Is that a gimmick you have, or?
Yes, it is.
All right, cool.
None are needed. I didn't say I wouldn't take if they weren't around.
Huh. First of all, I guess you're a huge wrestling fan growing up and stuff like that, and was it your uncle? That was
Grandfather.
Grandfather?
My grandfather, the famous Popeye. Well, he was very over in my town.
Right. So you were a big wrestling fan growing up, and why don't you tell us about your background as far as being a fan first?
I met my grandfather's actually my stepmother's father. I met him. I think when I was 5 years old, and he was a guy that was in my dad's house trying to sell him Venetian blinds or something like that. I was looking, he was a very odd fellow. He was real big, and his hair was bleach blonde. And he was all bent over and hunched, and he was talking like, "I give you a nice set of blinds." And I'm like, "Who is this weird guy to my dad's house?" And he come downstairs, and I just happened to be flipping the channels, and Andre was on doing an interview with Vince. And he starts talking. He's like, "Oh, that's young fella. I was living in Montreal." And I'm like, "Why is this Venetian blind guy talking about this big giant with this big afro?" I had no idea what I was even watching. I had to be turning the channels when he walked in. And then he starts explaining to me, and my dad told me who he was. And it happened to be like a couple days before they were in the garden. Andre were Killer Khan battling with Morocco. And he said, "Well, I could, bring you to see this stuff." And I had no idea what it was. I just watched it for a minute. And he brought me to that first show. And I just, got in love with it immediately. And then he would bring me to the garden every month. We'd go to the Holland Hotel first, where the office used to be, and we'd meet Arnold Skolin and Gorilla Monsoon, who'd bring us in through the back door and stuff. It was the coolest thing. And just the second I started meeting these guys, they were just like larger than life, and it was just what I always wanted to do from that moment on.
Was he actually working on these shows too, or is he just getting?
No, he retired in like '76, and then went on to do many. Every old guy I meet, they always have a different story. Hey, is your grandfather still selling countertops? Is he still making Venetian blinds? Is he still a postman? He always had some other kind of crazy thing. But after he retired, he worked with Angelo Saboldi, like building a couple rings and agenting on some like Jersey like Sea Towns and stuff like that. But then he was at this point he was now selling microwaves and J.C. Penney.
Right.
But then he started hanging around more and more, and he would just bring me to see those guys. Then I would start getting into the smaller like local shows by myself. Like I had met Larry Sharp and Pat Passer would bring me in, and they let me put up the ring. And then some of the guys, I think I was probably like 10. I remember like rolling around with Moondog Spot, which was just which is really strange.
Right. So actually, what age did you say, all right, I want to actually do this, I want to be a wrestler?
From that very first show that I went to, I just knew that that's what I wanted to do, even though it was the first show I was seeing, so for a half hour of it, on Channel 9 the week before. And that's what I wanted to do. But then me and Balls, who were friends since childhood,
right,
found out about these shows in Brooklyn that were being held. This guy El Savage had like a basement, but with a ceiling high enough barely for a ring. And I don't know if it was actual. It's not Gleason's gym now, but there was something that said Gleason's gym. I don't know if the guy just happened to steal a sign and hang it up or something. But it was a building right by, like a train trestle went right by. And we were like 14, and we started taking the train. I would tell my mom sleeping over at John's house. John would say sleep over at my house. And we'd take the train up there and then take 2 subways to get to these buildings in Brooklyn. And they, for some reason, let us wrestle at 14 years old. I wrestled Black Gordman my first night there. Me and Balls wrestled the Headhunters the following week. And it was a real small little building, and they were playing Spanish music the whole time and doing commentary in Spanish while you were working. Frankie Williams was there. Jose Estrada was there a few times. And for some reason, they let us work, and they would give us like hot dogs, and then they would give us, they would like start giving us like shots and stuff like that. And we'd take the train back all hammered at 15. It was pretty,
So you had no.
What year was that? About late 87, 80s?
It was 7th and 8th grade, so 86.
86.
So you had no professional training at the time. It was just pretty much.
Well, and every weekend, I go to see my father on the weekends, and he'd take me to my grandfather's house, and we'd put the TV on, and we'd watch Georgia and Florida and all that stuff. And then he'd move the coffee table out of the room, the TV room, and we'd start, goofing around. He really didn't smarten me up at the time, but we would just be going through, holds, and he'd be, hitting me and stuff. And then my poor grandma would have to come in, and he would go ahead and, grab me in a headlock, and I'd top wrist lock him up, and he'd be like, "Hon, look at my hair." My poor girl would have to walk around, so I'm pulling his hair, and he'd pull my hair, and then he'd go to shoot him off, and he's gonna hold on to my hair and pull me back in. So I figured, well, I want to impress him, show him I'm tough. So I go to shoot him off to the ropes of the wall next to the TV. And he's running, and he pulled me back in, and I wanted to show him how tough I was. So I came in hard, and I hit him right in the back. He just flips out, like, "You little fucker!" Starts forearming me on the back and stuff. And that was my training. And it was just kind of like on the job stuff after that.
Right. Now, as far as getting with Larry Sharp, did Larry take you under his wing at all, and did you have to pay for anything with training there? Or?
Larry kind of trained me. His first match was in Wildwood against my grandfather when he first broke in. So when I heard about the school, my grandfather brought me down, and Buddy Rogers was still there at the time. So I didn't know what it meant at the time as I did later on when I got to to be in the ring with Buddy Rogers. And then Larry would let my grandfather bring me down every week after the class was over, and he would work out with me. And then after that, I just started, riding down, get rides from guys like Eric Sims and my next door neighbor and handsome Jimmy Shoulders and other guys who were old enough to drive at the time. And they'd drive me down, and Larry would just kind of let us go in the ring and do our stuff. And some of the other guys that were there, before me, like Bam Bam and Scotty and Ray Odyssey, they would work out with us a little bit and help us out.
Right, Scotty, you mean Raven?
Yeah.
For those that don't know. As far as like Balls, was he a wrestling fan, or did you get him into like the business as far as like watching it?
He was kind of a wrestling fan. We went to different grammar schools. We lived on opposite sides of the town. And so I just moved to this town, and my mom's like, oh, you got to meet friends, so be on the baseball team. I didn't know how to play baseball. I didn't like baseball. I had no idea. And I was a little short, fat kid. They didn't have a uniform that fit me, so I had a Roddy Piper t-shirt on, and they put me like in far, far right field where nothing's ever going to come anywhere near me. So I'm standing out there, and there comes this big behemoth, just, great big beard, gigantic 300-pound man. It was Balls in 4th grade. Riding up on his bicycle. And he starts talking to me, and he's like, oh, you like wrestling? I'm like, yeah. And starts saying, he watches the show, but he wasn't as insane as we later became.
Right.
And a ball comes flying. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm playing on a team. He's like, there's a ball coming. I remember just didn't miss a beat of the conversation. It was like, yeah, remember last week when Roddy Piper took my mitt off, he just threw it in the air, hoping somehow, magically, that the ball would go into the mitt. And that was when myself and Balls Mahoney's friendship began.
That's awesome. Now, as far as like the first real legitimate indie show that you started working on, where you could say that you had an understanding of the business, when would that take place?
Well, those shows that we were doing that when we were young, we kept doing them for a number of years. They weren't necessarily, they weren't legitimate in that there was.
Were they outlaw shows?
Yeah, there was no commission, and there was people like later on reading Cactus's book, that George Espada that he mentions in there, who was working those shows at the time. I remember him telling me and John the same thing that he told Cactus that he wrote about in that book, that he was the champion of Guatemala and Ecuador, and he runs tours here and there. At the time, we're 14, 15, we're mesmerized by the guy. Later did we realize the guy's 50 years old and he's wrestling in the basement below a bar, so it really couldn't have been all that great. But there was people there that, obviously were better than 15-year-old kids we got to learn from. But then Larry Sharp started using my grandfather as a manager, and they started running some towns together. So then they put me on a show. It was the night that I met Tammy, actually. And I remember sitting in the stands in the afternoon with Larry, my grandfather, and Dennis. And Larry's going over the show, and he said, oh, we're going to put the junior belt on Candido. And Dennis is sitting right in front of me. He goes, who the fuck's Candido? And I said, oh, that's me. And he looked back. He was like, how the fuck you doing? And later, and he was, I thought, man, what a guy's kind of a jerk off. We became best friends after that day. But that was, I guess, my first real show was June of '90, the one that was an actual real show.
Right. Was that WWA? Is that what it's
Yes.
called? Okay. How did you meet Tammy? She was at the show. Was she a fan or?
She was a fan when she was a kid, and somehow her sister knew. That Professor Elliott.
Yes.
For you guys don't know, Professor Elliott's a guy who he worked at Shea Stadium, worked at Madison Square Garden. He became an usher and stuff. Became friends with all the boys. It's like when she was a kid, our sister would take her to the Howard Johnsons by the Meadowlane and stuff to meet the boys when she was 10, 12 years old, stuff, get autographs and everything. And her sister somehow stayed in contact with Elliot, Christmas cards and stuff like that. And the show was in their town, so this guy called and says, hey, I'm here near you, I haven't seen you in a couple of years. She's like, oh, I'll go by. So she called, her sister called Tammy and said, hey, this Elliot guy, she's like, she's in high school. The last thing she wants to do is go watch wrestling and see a guy named Professor Elliott, who was kind of cool when you were 9, but after you're about 10 and a half, he's kind of a goof.
Right.
But so anyway, so she ended up going anyway, and I wrestled Johnny Hotbody, and I remember having Johnny down. I'm like, and I was eager. I wanted to go. And I'm like, Johnny, you want this? He's like, no, move me this way. I'm like, what is it? He's like, look at the girl in the white over there. I'm like, dude, you're 30-something years old. She's in high school, But after the show, we just kind of got to talking and stuff. Was when everything was everybody was exiting, and she didn't realize that I was the tremendous professional athlete that I was. She just thought that I was apparently a good-looking young high school man. But then when she realized that I was, as of that day, a world champion professional athlete, I guess she was just awfully smitten.
What do you think your moment on the Indies that you would like to look back on and say, this is when you made it?
When Dennis brought Cornette in to manage me a few times, and we just really kind of clicked, and he really helped build my confidence up and stuff. And then he managed me for 2 shows, and then Goodhart ran something, and he had Lawler and Eddie Gilbert there, who I had met previously when he would come in for Dennis and stuff, but I wasn't actually on those shows, but I got to meet the guys and everything. So Dennis took me and Tammy to play this Ribbits restaurant in Philly, and Cornette introduced me to Eddie and Lawler and stuff, and I said, yeah, I'd love to come down to Memphis. And later, as I found out in Jerry's book, he wanted me to come down, figuring I'd bring Tammy. So when Jerry got me booked, he got me booked.
Was Tammy doing anything in business?
No, she was like, just like taking pictures of me and stuff and trying to, taping my matches so I could watch them and see what I did right and wrong. And then ended up, she was taking pictures of everybody's matches, and Bill Apter was like paying her like, $5 a picture if he printed it or something like that. Like she got the centerfold the one time of the Rock and Roll getting tarred and feathered by the Heavenly Bodies. That was her picture and stuff. And so we sat there for dinner, and then, and Eddie said he'd, talk to Lawler and really try and push it on him. And then a couple weeks later, Jerry called me and said, do you want to come down to Memphis?
Right. What was that like, going to Memphis? That was your first big break, right?
Yeah, that was my, and everybody who had already been there that was back in Jersey, like Ray Odyssey and stuff, was like, man, you're going to starve down there and this and that. And Ray was a great talent, but I think he thought he was going to go to Memphis and be on TV and make money and then come back and immediately be somebody, which is not necessarily obviously the way it doesn't work. But I just wanted to go down there because being who my grandfather was, never, really an over fella, but he was always, like before the Johnny Rods generation, he was always the opening match at the Garden. So he got to wrestle like Terry Funk's first match when he came in and stuff. So I always kind of envisioned myself as, for some reason that seemed cooler to me. Like I always wanted to be the guy, to not necessarily be, the star, but make other guys look good. Like when I was little and me and my brother would like want to play wrestling and stuff, he would always want to be like Big John Studd, and I was always Pretty Boy Doug Summers. I just always wanted to be the guy to make somebody else, look good. So I knew what Memphis was all about. I knew I would go down there and learn and not make a hell of a lot of money. So I did, went down there and starved, but learned.
Who was booking at the time, Dundee or Lawler?
Eric Embry, actually.
Embry.
Jerry Giard had taken the summer off, and he did an angle with Lawler where Jeff Gaylord was the Texas Ranger and had heard him, and he was still coming in and out, but Eric Embry was doing all the booking. And my first night, I'm just immediately out of high school. He said, I worked with the Texas Outlaw number 9 or something like that. And he said, well, you're a babyface. I said, I'm a horrible babyface. He said, but look at you. I looked like the quintessential Southern babyface. I was a small, bleach blonde, young-looking kid. And I said, well, I'm not very good at it. He said, you'll be fine. I went out. I came back for the match. Eric said, what do you think about being a heel? And so the next night I worked with Danny Davis. And we just locked up, and I'm just listening. And he goes, well, are you the heel or not? I said, yes, sir. He goes, well, tell me something. So I'm like, okay, we did a little something. I'm getting the heat on him, and he's listening again. So I called something else. He said, no. I called something else. He goes, no. I'm like, God damn, this guy's going to kill me. I said something else. He went, Jesus, no. I said, one more thing. He goes, okay. Well, we went and did it, and we got back, and I was like, man, I'm sorry if I was doing something wrong. He was like, no, the stuff you had, your ideas were fine. He goes, but we're going to have to be here. This is our first week. We're going to be here the next 6 weeks together. He's like, try to remember that, and we'll use it then. And so that kind of was opening my eyes to, it was my first break. To me, being from the Clementon Flea Market, New Jersey, also being in the Louisville Gardens, regardless of the fact that there was only 8 people there, it was still a big deal to me getting to be on ESPN and doing the live Memphis TV. So I really wanted to go all out. But the whole time I was there, I don't think I went to the top rope once. But guys like like Danny and Bill Dundee and stuff really, really helped and taught me. And that's where I met Dr. Tom. And there was something about him that just kind of like, when he talks to you, he talks like in circles. And he's like almost like he's like a prophet or something. He doesn't tell you exactly what he wants to say. You have to kind of really read into it. And it took me a number of years to realize stuff he told me when I first met him. It took me 5 years to realize what he was trying to say. But he really kind of took me under his wing and helped me out a lot too. There was a good bunch of guys there.
What about Jared Lawler? What was he like?
He wasn't around that much when I was there. Because they did the angle, he was hurt and he was just kind of in and out. He was cool to me, but I didn't really get to be around him all that much. My only good Jerry Lawler story from when I was there, he came back one night in Louisville, and all the heels had to hit and take the pile driver. And as a joke, apparently it was as a joke, I didn't realize it at the time because I was just happy to be there. He said, oh, whoever takes the best bump, I'll bonus you 10% of your pay, and laughed. So Eric Emery went and got pile drive, and Tex Salinger went, Sabu went, and then it was like Gypsy Joe and then me. And when I rolled out, and Gypsy Joe was as El Grande Pistolero, he were leaning together the apron. And he went, "God damn, Candido, that was a cool bump." And laughing, he was like, "Man," he goes, "I guess you won the money." So I'm thinking, "Oh damn, I won 10%." So I went down and I got my $4 from the king. I got my 10% of my pay. And he went ahead and gave it to me.
Is this the territory where you kind of learned the psychology of the business and stuff?
Yeah, you had no choice to, because the guys were, guys that were already kind of getting up in years, and they really didn't want to, which is, smarter. Then you think at that point you think they're lazy. Now that I'm kind of in the same boat, you realize that they're just being smarter. And they have to go to the same towns, every week, so you can't do all that stuff. You have to try and tell people the difference. It's very different than what it is now. So they couldn't physically do all that kind of stuff. Even if they had the ability to, it just wouldn't make sense to go ahead and just blow your load every week when you're going to be back in the town in 5-6 days. So you really learned psychology. Guys and the guys took the time. We would get Jerry Jarrett bought Waylon Jennings' tour bus, and we would all meet at the Kmart parking lot in Memphis at 2:00 in the morning on Thursday, and drive all night in the tour bus to Dallas, go to the Sportatorium, do TV, turn around and drive back in the morning just in time to get off the bus, get into the studio, go on live TV, do live TV, then drive to Nashville that night. And the whole time on the bus, that was the greatest learning experience. Guys like Robert Fuller and Eddie Gilbert would go with us sometimes, and and Dr. Tom and Gypsy Joe, and they would just sit up all night. They were guys who just obviously they were down there making the money that that we were. They were obviously doing it not for the notoriety or the money, because they loved the business. And they would just sit up with me all night on that 11-hour ride back and forth to Dallas and just really school you on what stuff was all about.
How long were you down there for, Memphis?
It wasn't very long. It was barely 5 months.
5 months.
You
sorry.
You mentioned Sabu was down there, right? Was that the first time you met Sabu?
Yeah, that's the first time we met. I remember the first. He was there. I was there 2 weeks, and when he came in, and we got back from Dallas, showed up at TV, and there was this new guy. He was really skinny at the time. We all were. We were awfully young. Plus, as the longer we stayed there, the skinnier we got. And he was putting on a pair of Zubaz, and he was like, first puts them on, he wraps duct tape around his leg because he wrestled with no shoes to kind of make it that genie pant look.
Right.
And him and Judge Dredd had a tag match, and Judge kind of screwed up a couple things, and Sabu came back and was just like yelling. I'm like, who is this little dude screaming at this big, gigantic monster? And then all of a sudden, Judge Dredd opened his mouth. He goes, "I'm sorry, Sabu." This little voice. It was the strangest thing. And then we ended up riding together to Louisville the following night. And he was like, when's payday? So it's usually, on Wednesday. He goes, well, how was it? And I think I had only gotten paid so far for my first week, because they hold a week back. And I said, well, I got $99. And apparently he thought I meant per night. That was for the entire week. So he got his first, in Evansville, he went ahead and got his envelope and opened it up, and he was like, "No, this can't be." He went and talked to Eric Emery. He's like, "I can't do this. I got to go." Eric went, "All right, be careful driving home."
Huh.
And then he called Cheek, and Cheek told him, "No, that's the way stuff is, and to go ahead and stay." But he was we became really tight down there. We just had a really good time. We drove, he had this really, really big yellow Cadillac that had like funny horn, like that had the, what the heck do you call it, the Dukes of Hazzard horn, when he would make that sound and stuff. And his last night, I have the tape of it. We were in Tell City, Indiana, against Robert Fuller and Bill Dundee. And Bill would make him do the crisscross spot and then stop. And he'd point up, and Sabu would look, and Bill would step on his foot. You have to sell his bare foot and step on his other foot. And there was hair in his face. He would do it to come back. He just walked back all mad. He's like, "Now it's your fucking turn." You just stand there all angry, because he wanted to be. He wanted to be the Sheik still. He didn't enjoy doing any comedic stuff. But it was there that we became friends. And then when I came home, it was like a month later. We talked to each other like every day, just because we're both trying to get booked. So we were in the same boat to sit there and talk and gripe about there's no work and bitch about this and that. But then he called me and said Kevin Sullivan had canceled an FMW tour, and so Sheik said, bring your little blonde buddy. So he kind of got me over there, and then we hung out there every day too. Before
Japan, you mentioned going down to Texas. Was that for Fritz?
No, it was part of the USWA thing.
Okay, that's when they were.
Yeah, we just took the bus down there, and there was no Dallas guys there.
Okay,
at the time. Garrett Young would just come in because he was a local guy, and I think that was pretty much it.
Right, I remember that.
Since that was your first territory working at, who was the one person that you met? You were like, "Wow, this guy's really cool," and who was the one guy you met? "Wow, what a dick! I can't believe he treated me like that."
Dr. Tom and Eddie Gilbert were definitely the two coolest guys. God, was the biggest dick. truthfully, there really wasn't anybody that was an asshole down there. Gypsy Joe scared me sometimes. You know, like I didn't meet him because we were in separate locker rooms, you know, the majority of the time. I really didn't get a chance to meet him until one night in Nashville when I worked with him, and I got him in the ring, and I was like, well, there's this guy is an old rickety fella. I didn't know that El Grande Pistolero was Gypsy Joe. I knew of a Gypsy Joe who, at this point, you figure would be dead,
right.
You know. And so he backs over into the corner and he goes like, "Chop me, motherfucker." So I'm like, damn, I want to nail the guy. Plus, everybody down there worked kind of light, you know. So I hit him. He's like, "You stupid pussy," and grabbed me and just beat the living crap out of me. I mean, he wasn't a dick per se. He was just kind of tough, and he scared me a few times. When it was close to when I was going home, I was driving by myself with like a long trip, and I had to go to the bathroom, but I pull into Waffle House to pee, and I hear yelling, and I walk around the thing, and also on the glass, there's Gypsy Joe, who had just signed himself out of the hospital after he had gotten shot with a bullet still in him because he was going to Japan in 2 days. So he just left the hospital and came to TV and showed everybody his scar and stuff. He was apparently working in Indie Town nearby, came to the Waffle House, and a bunch of guys were in there, you know, saying stuff, so he opened his mouth whatever. He's like, "You guys ain't shit, I'll kill all you motherfuckers." So I walk in, I'm like, God, and all of a sudden he looks past them to me. He goes, "Oh, now motherfuckers." There's like 4 of them guys, and you know, all, you know, big fat flannel shirts and chew and stuff. He goes like, "Now what you gonna do? Now Candido's here too." I go, "Now they're gonna fucking kill both, you know, both of us." So he was a cool guy, but it could be scary sometimes.
What was the road schedule like as far as traveling in Memphis?
Monday, and a lot of guys stayed in Nashville, but I stayed in Memphis. Why, I don't know. But Monday we were in Memphis. Tuesday we drove like 6.5 hours to Louisville. Then after that we drove that night to Evansville, like 3 hours, worked there Wednesday. Thursday was a spot show somewhere, so we drive back like 7 hours up the Western Kentucky Parkway to Memphis, work a spot show around there Thursday. Thursday night, get on the bus, drive to Dallas, do the Sportatorium on Friday, come all the way back that night, go off the bus, go to TV Saturday morning, go to Nashville Saturday night, 3 hours away, and then Sunday you're off sometimes, but a lot of times Eric Embry started me getting booked for Rip Rogers in Indiana because Eric was getting the dates, but Eric had no car, and I had a car, so I would get to drive my boss to Rip Rogers' indie shows in Indiana, and Eric. It was doing a gimmick with Tex Salinger was Leatherface, and Tex were with us too. Me and Tex lived together for a while at the Budget Lodge in Memphis it was like $100 a week, and you had to stay on the top floor, and you had no maid service. You had to do your own sheets and everything like that. The whole time we were staying together, probably a little over a month. Tex didn't only wash his sheets, didn't wash his clothes. Had a big bundle of clothes on the floor. We just like grabbed stuff out of it and stuff, and then they finished him up as Tex and made him Leatherface. So Lawler said, he's like, you got a kayfabe, but without anybody knowing, because the same people come to all the shows and stuff. So we would get a room on the other side of the hotel, and he stole the sheet and cut eye holes in it, and he would carry the chainsaw, and I put a chain around his neck, and we'd like walk him out to the car and stuff. Just, like any time of the day, like not just going to the town. If we're going to the store, we walk out like that because we're like, damn, we better listen. I don't know if they were ribbing us or if they was that serious back then. But then we get out of the car and we walk into the building, and there was always like the same rats and stuff in Louisville. And he's like, "Hey Chris, hey Tex," the old toy chains on. "How you doing?" with the stuff on and everything like that.
That's awesome. You talked about FMW, went over to Japan. How different was that working over in Japan and the States?
Well, my first night there, I knew that Kevin Sullivan had canceled. That was the reason I got to go. I didn't necessarily know that I was now taking his spot. So my first night there, I was in the main event in a street fight with Onita. So I'm scared to death. I mean, first it's the boss, and I don't know what necessarily a street fight in FMW entails. So I just had my jeans on, and I looked like I was going to a bunkhouse match. Pulled my knee pads above my jeans, and was kind of ready to go. And some guy comes running in. He's going, "No paint." I'm going, "All right." I didn't know what he was saying, and my music starts playing. They're telling me, he's going, "No, you paint." Like, "I paint what?" So the referee comes over, he goes, "No, you need paint on your face." So that big Titan, who was the Razor Ramon later, he was painting stuff on his face. So he came over, just a brush with just white paint on he was doing, and he just made a lightning bolt in the front of my face. And that was my first night. And Onita he was the boss, and I did what I could for him. We just kind of walked around the building holding each other by the hair and running each other into the walls. It wasn't all that. Once we did that, I'm like, well, this is supposed to be the best guy here. It's going to be kind of easy. And then the only hard part every night was Rick would have fun painting my face, and I'm touchy with like my eyes, and he would want to get like real intricate, so my eyes would be watering up, he'd rub it off, but I'd never know what it would be until I was done. He made like a big Batman thing. He did one that looked real horrible, like the Jaws with the sharks come out of the water like that. I had that on my face one day. I didn't know what he was putting on until he was all the way done. And And then Sabu did like 2 barbed wire matches there, and apparently he had no blade left, so they took the free shaving razor from the hotel and broke that up and was using that. And apparently he thought it was not gonna. He was worried it was not gonna cut him well enough, so he's like killing his poor. So that's where those main big disgusting scars are all from that one match, from that one incident. And he comes back from the barbed wire match, and we had to do a run-in and clip the wires down and wrap Onita in the wire. And then his music hits out of the blue, and he comes and starts bumping us. So he bumps Horace Boulder, bumps Titan, bumps Billy Anderson. And I'm like, well, this guy is just charging us with barbed wire on him. I'm not getting paid awfully well. And he starts chasing me to crush me with barbed wire. I said, screw that. And in Kawasaki, the door just opens and you're right on the floor. So I just ran around the heel locker room and closed the door. And he was beating on it to run into a barbed wire. I was like, you're not doing that for what he was. I knew I wasn't coming back already because he needed American heels that were great big guys, which I obviously was not. But then Sabu came back and he thought it wasn't cutting him, but it was cutting him so deep that it was like white styrofoam stuff like hanging out of his body. And he was like, oh my god, and he was like, get your camera. I'm like, ready, 1, 2, oh my god. And our rooms are always right next to each other, so the showers in those cheap hotels, it's like, you know, your sink is connected to it, and the showers would butt up against each other. I'd hear him screaming, taking the tape off. When he was done, I'd have to go in his room and he would like hold his stomach shut, stuff the styrofoam, whatever it was, back in. I would just wrap him back up in tape all night, and then for dinner we'd put hot water in the sink and put like Dinty Moore beef stew with down to move around in the hot water, and then that's what we'd eat.
Ugh. Crazy. After there, you came back to the States, obviously, and where'd you go from there?
I think it was just stuff back around here, working for guys like, in Jersey and New York, and then that Ed Zahn in Baltimore started doing some kind of stuff. So the Indies were, busy for then, being a kid and stuff, but it wasn't all. I started doing stuff for for the Savoldis, that IWCCW stuff. One thing I did for them, we did TV in Hamburg, Pennsylvania, and so we were going to do a big angle. You're going to come out from underneath the ring to show you here for the first time. I was all right. So it was intermission, and they put me in a garbage can on a thing with stuff from the ring and wheeled me out and rolled the can underneath the ring. I'm laying underneath there for quite a few hours. When I hear my cue, I come out, go to the top rope, and Tommy Dreamer was working with Lombardi. I went ahead and jumped on Tommy. Me and Lombardi beat him up, and then came in Duke the Pitbull Snyder, who I'm sure everybody's heard of. He went ahead and came in, and we set up our big tag match return. When the TV aired, no less than 5 years later, finally, I see it. I'm like, why is this on? I had never seen it previously, and it's all these years later, and they just show me all of a sudden, out of the blue, they're showing the match. All of a sudden, Chris Candido's on the top rope. He must have come right out of the locker room. I spent 5 hours underneath the goddamn ring that day. So that was my Savaldi's experience. But there was a decent enough amount of indie work around here at the time.
Was Tammy still going to shows with you at the time?
Yeah, she hadn't started working yet. She was just going and still doing the Bill Apter picture stuff,
right.
and taping my matches, and she would get the or the 1980s boom box and the 2 VCRs and the TV, and somehow it was making me like tapes to send out and try and get work and stuff like that.
Now I remember seeing you back in, I think it was 88 and 89, backstage at the Civic Center. You were setting up the rings and all, right?
Yeah, well, Klondike Bill's another guy who my grandfather worked with in the Carolinas for a little while, and I got in contact with him, and he would, he'd let me come down and for free, and put up the ring.
Right.
And then, and then he would let us, roll around in the afternoon and stuff like that. So that was, it was just cool because those guys seemed a lot cooler at the time. So it was late '80s. We weren't allowed to go to the WWF shows anymore and do that kind of stuff because it became what it was.
Right.
So the NWA guys were a hell of a lot cooler. All the boys. I remember Tracy Smothers. I think it was '89 or something, right when he was there. And we did the ring in Wildwood, and Kevin Sullivan was trying to get me. Kevin Sullivan and Ricky Morton, who I didn't really even know Ricky yet, were trying to get me on the show because Big Josh or something was not showing up. I ended up not working, but they were all really cool guys trying to help me out. I remember talking to Tracy, and some kid walks in who was waiting for tickets. He's like, "Man, are you a wrestler?" Tracy's like, "Yeah, man, I'm wrestling. How you doing, kid?" And I goes, "Which one are you?" He goes, "Ultimate Warrior." And the guy's like, "Oh my God!" And he signed Ultimate Warrior and stuff. And the next day we're at the Meadowlands, and me and handsome Jimmy Shoulders are working out in the afternoon. And Tracy came out, and he was like, "Man, I got to work out with somebody. I want to try the spot." So me and Tracy worked out for about an hour in the jam-packed, empty Meadowlands at 2 in the afternoon.
That's awesome. From there, you at what point did you go to Smoky Mountain?
It was the end of '92, I think. we went down. Yeah, Christmas of '92. I was at my grandmother's house, and Taz was at his mom's, and me and Taz spent the whole night on the phone bitching that there was not any work going on. We said, you know what? Said next week Cornette has like 5 shows. You want to just drive down and we'll just show up? I said, yeah. What the hell? We called him today where he was like, I don't know if I can use you. He's like, we don't care. We're coming anyway. So Tammy rode with us. We went down there, and the first night we're in Farmville, Virginia, and he put us on the first match. And me and Taz went to Johnny Rodden's school, and the Garden State Parkway was closed because of the snow was so bad. I had just gotten a new car for the first time in my life, and I had it for a day, and I drove it on the closed Garden State Parkway. Almost, I mean, they would have arrested you had they seen you driving, but luckily no cops were out because the snow was like 9 feet tall. I met Taz at the gym, and we went over, which is the exact wrong thing to do. We went over this match step by step by step and move by move, and we did every move imaginable to mankind. We went in Farmville, Virginia, and did that match, and the people didn't make a sound. They just stared at us like, who are these idiots? And we came back all tired, out of breath, and Cornette was like, that was goddamn great. If you were in fucking Mexico City, he goes, watch this. And Dr. Tom and Tim Horner go out, and they did like a headlock and the same big spot my grandfather did with me. The top wrist lock, Tom grabbed Tim Horner's hair, and the place went nuts. And he was like, you're in a different place. And had already being in Memphis, I figured I should have known that, but I was like, I was so excited once again to have been back to the, indies. Now I get another break. I figure, well, at least, I'll show I can do all this stuff. Again, the wrong thing to do. But went ahead and did it anyway. And then the next night they used Taz again, and I did a couple jobs as the Masked Avenger to Jimmy Golden at Freedom Hall in Johnson City. And it was like one of their bigger shows. It was a pretty good house. And Cornette says, okay, you're on first with Jimmy Golden. I was the Avenger. He goes, all right, the finish is a drop kick. I mean, I still now get careless about doing a job, especially when it was Jimmy Golden. I was the Avenger. I said, but Jimmy Golden's finish is a drop kick? He goes, just watch. And Jimmy Golden hit me with a drop kick, and the place went crazy. And then the end of our couple-day run there, it was after a big show in Knoxville. Cornette took us to this rib place on the water there. And he says, like, I got an idea. He's like, I need a girl to do this thing. And he was like, I can't pay you enough for you to move down here. I was like, I don't care. I'll move. I'll live in my car. He was like, well, I don't want to do that to you. I'm like, please do it to me. So he said, well, I got this idea. And I asked Tammy if she would do what she ended up doing. And she was like, well, I'm going to school. I don't know how to do it. He's like, well, just give it a shot because you might be right for it. We went ahead and moved down. And at TV, she would go out and, cut her promos and stuff like that. And all the boys are kind of looking at me because I'm there, but I was doing jobs as the Masked Avenger on TV. And she was obviously in an angle, so Scott Armstrong was like, dude, what the hell's going on? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just working and keep my mouth shut. And then, Cornette had the idea. I came in with the Dennis Carluzzo belt, so I would stay after the TV was over to cut my promos. Like I was sending him in, by the mail and stuff.
Right,
That's how it
right.
all started.
Was there any jealousy at the time between you and Tammy?
No. I mean, it was. I knew that the spot that he had for a blonde, bitchy girl northern manager very well couldn't be mine.
Right.
Because I'm not all that masculine, so I couldn't pass for a girl. I could be a bitch sometimes, but it definitely couldn't have been my spot. And I knew something was going to be coming, and I really didn't care because I was just in the ring. I didn't care what I was doing as long as I was in there doing something, And it was only supposed to be a 6-month deal for her. Tony Atlas was supposed to be coming in for her to manage him in the South. Would be a real heated deal with a young white girl managing a big black guy. That would be, border on, terrorism down there. But Tony's wife at some of the time wouldn't let him do it. So every week she would go out and try to recruit somebody else. And we were doing that because Jim didn't know what to do now. And then it ended up doing the thing where they turned Brian Lee.
Right. What are some of your early memories of Smoky Mountain, some of your main programs down there?
My first program was with Tim Horner. And we did the thing where, I was a crybaby and bitch and moan about stuff. And he did a deal one night and he said, let's just say because I came with the Dennis Carluzzo's belt saying I was the real world champion. And I did promos saying every week I would talk about guys I'd beat and I would throw out names like Hogan, Flair, Jushin Liger, and I would always throw in somebody else. You guys know who J.R. Benson is?
Yeah.
Remember that guy? I would throw his name in there. I was throwing just stuff to entertain myself just to be, because I was supposed to be an idiot. So
right.
It worked out kind of well. And then Tim Horner said, well, you're supposed to be a world champion. I bet it was Robbie Eagle, who was later on the Maestro. He said, I bet you can't even beat this guy. I said, Robbie, how many matches have you won on Smoky Mountain TV? He said, none. I said, you think I can't beat him? He's like, yeah, you know what? It's like, you can't beat him. And and in fact, I bet he beats you. When he does beat you, you have to wear the baby bonnet on, until you win another match on TV. So I commenced to whumping the hell out of Robbie Eagle, and here comes Tim Horner in, ready to hit me, but then drops elbow on Robbie. So I got DQ'd. So there in hell, I had to wear this big blue baby bonnet, like the cow wears on the milk or whatever, the cottage cheese, that big thing. And Cornette's like, so now you got to wear it, like not just TV, but the house shows and stuff. But I wore it everywhere. I'm going to the Kroger's, I'm going to get my car washed. Like had the bonnet on all the time. I just, and then from there, we had to wear we had a diaper match, baby bottle match, all that kind of stuff. And then we finally, when the blow-off was the diaper one, and I couldn't figure out where I was going from there. And having just been in Memphis for those few months, I figured out how stuff went. So that night we did the diaper match. I told, Jimmy, man, thank you so much for having me and everything. He was like, well, where the hell are you going? I said, well, I guess I'm done. What am I going to do? He was like, no, you're just getting started. He's like, I don't know what we're going to do with you yet, because Tim's a cool guy, but he never got the push in the bigger companies, and Smoky Mountain was based in his hometown. So I was a young guy who was willing to do anything and bump like crazy for him and wear diapers and stuff. So I was kind of buried at this point. I really had no heat left because nothing else could be done to me. So he wanted to keep me, possibly because he liked me, but then he needed Tammy too because she was getting over so well. So they're trying to think of something to do, and Tracy Smothers just volunteered. He goes, no, let him leave. He goes, have him beat me on TV clean next week. And that was, so Tracy was, had it not been for him volunteering to do that, I don't know what I would have became. I probably would have been back up at the Route 30 flea market with Dennis,
Right. How did, as far as after that with Tracy, where did that lead in Smoky Mountain to?
Me and Tracy did those ladder matches and stuff. There's Razor and Sean were doing them on the road.
This is what, 92 maybe?
93, I think.
Okay.
Sean and Razor were doing them to practice doing them apparently, and so Jimmy had seen them and wanted us to do them. So me and Tracy were doing stuff that at the time was innovative, but Jimmy the money down there wasn't great. So and it wasn't. He didn't want to spend somebody else's money, which it was being backed by whatever Rick Rubin or the music guy and stuff. So we always had the same ladder. We did like 50 of these matches with the same ladder that's now all bent up and sharp on the edges. We're taping broomsticks to it so it wouldn't fall apart and stuff like that.
That's great.
So we were having a lot of fun, and then me and Brian Lee worked with the Rock and Roll, which was working with Ricky Morton was one of the coolest things of all time. He's just, everything he does is just so perfect and smooth. And the first time I got to work with him, I was just from memory, because I've watched it 1,000 times, wanting to do all these Ricky Morton, Bobby Eaton spots. And he looked at me like I was out of my mind. He was just like, we're not going to do that. But then you started calling stuff in the ring that was, almost as fast moving and stuff, and I was blown up being a kid in shape who wasn't doing anything yet except, I didn't even drink a beer at the time. I was doing nothing except wanting to be, the most in shape I could be. And there's Ricky, he was, smoking cigarettes before the match, doing Lord only knows what else. He was never a physical specimen. He just running circles around me. He was just, everything he did was just so perfect. And then they put me and Brian together. That's how me and Tammy ended up being together too. And Tammy went from working with Tracy Smothers, who, Tracy wanted to help get her over. So when Brian would lean Tracy over the ropes, Tammy would come and smack him. And the camera was right there. Tracy was just lay it in. And she would be smacking him, and Tracy's like, harder, harder, harder. And she's smacking hell out of him to the point where her hand is like red and blue and throbbing and stuff. So then she goes from working with Tracy to working with Ricky Morton. And so Brian holds Ricky Morton over, she comes and just slaps him, and Ricky Morton just completely stops selling, jumps up in the air and goes, don't ever touch me again! And went and tagged out to Robert and brought her in the back and was showing her how to properly slap without touching the guy. But still to this day, when she works or doing a spot with the slap, she was like, am I doing the Tracy or the Ricky Morton? And all depending on who it is, they have their choice.
From there, teaming with Brian, did you like actually teaming with Brian, or did you like working singles?
I was thinking of this the other day because somebody mentioned something about me doing some kind of tag thing, and I thought, man, I'm really more of a singles wrestler, but I'm really not. Every place I've been, I've really been in tags, and Jimmy wanted me and Brian to be a team kind of along the lines of Buddy Landell and Butch Reed, where Buddy was a little shit stirrer, and and Butch was standing back there, and Buddy would be like, hey, Butch, tell me how I taught you how to bench 500 pounds, and taught me, and it was just the size difference, and me being a little wise ass, and Brian, being big and tough was kind of, it was good for each other,
Right. After that run, where did you end up at, or did you stay there for a little bit longer?
After Brian left, me and Bobby Blaze did the stuff for the U.S. Junior belt where I threw him in the lake and all that kind of stuff. And that's where me and Bobby would sit and watch Japan tapes. We saw Liger and Benoit do that top rope power bomb, so I used that down there. But we were doing the tar and feather matches, and we wanted to get the move in, but being the intelligent kids we were, I didn't use it for a finish. Powerbomb Bobby Blaze off the top rope, and I still lost the match minutes later after he somehow miraculously got up from it, which was asinine. And Thanksgiving night, we're in Hazard, Kentucky, and Kevin Sullivan comes back and raving about the match, but said, how the hell would you do that move? And then you get beat by a schoolboy a minute later, you're an idiot. He's screaming at us. But the funny part, he's yelling, he's like, you stupid fucks, I can't believe you did this, that you're killing the fucking business. That makes no goddamn sense. And the music starts playing, he goes, I'll be back, I gotta go stab somebody with a spike. After it was during the Bobby Blaze thing, Dory and Terry had come in, we did some stuff in Marietta, and I was starting to be around Junior a little bit, and he got me booked for Baba. While I was in Japan, Tammy drove up to visit her mom. She picked me up in LaGuardia, and we went by the Meadowlands to see Dr. Tom. And that night I met Bruce Pritchard, and I met Pat Patterson when I was a kid, and he knew my grandfather, so I introduced myself to him, and they were cool and whatnot. And then that night we drove home to Knoxville. By the time we got home, there was a message on the machine from Bruce saying, go to the Knoxville airport, there's a prepaid ticket, you're having a meeting with Vince. So it was, we went right to the airport, we were seeing Vince the next day, and he said, well, I have possible ideas for you, take these contracts to your lawyer. I'm like, to my fucking lawyer?
Right.
I'm like, contract, I've already cut off my right arm and give it to him, but then, we got home and I was like, man, do I, Baba had offered me like 10 weeks a year. I was like, well, do I want to go and do that and still stay in Smoky Mountain where I really kind of felt at home? Or do I want to, do this? I mean, go where you wait your whole life to be in WWF. And the thing that made me, choose that was they were giving both of us a job, but I was a very annoying person to live with at that point, because you figured you'd be in a position where all these people want you, but I was real scared, didn't know what the right decision was to be.
Right. Did in the back of your mind at any time did you say maybe they just want me for Tammy, or was that ever in your head?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I thought it, and Vince even said to me in that meeting, he was like, would you be upset eventually if we split you up? He's like, she could be a big star. You can have a job, but you can be a big star. I mean, it just made sense because, there's hundreds of wrestlers, and there's only been very few girls, and in my mind, none that were ever nearly any as good. Trish is finally starting to do promos somewhat well, but they're scripted out.
Right.
Where then, like when she did the Godwin thing where she got slopped, Jim Ross said, look, you got 5 minutes, you hate finish, you love him, you hate him, you get slopped. And that was all the direction we got, and it was live to tape, and she went out and did it. So I'm sure they, had we not been together, I don't think they would have, followed me as much. But at the same time, I was a new guy that people were talking about, so I think I at least held my own.
Jimmy was cool when you told him that you gave your notice there, basically.
Well, what I had found out later was that Shane McMahon actually had called Jimmy a couple months earlier, and he kayfabed me on the whole deal because he wasn't done with what I was doing yet. But then he knew. But by the time we left the Meadowlands and we're driving home, he had already known that we were there and that they were calling us and stuff like that. So he was cool about it. He just said, can you finish up and stuff. And I was not in any rush to get out of there, especially after you signed the contract. There was no guaranteed money, but just the fact that you were under contract, they started mailing you. It was like $250 a week.
Right.
But I was making $400 for Cornette, plus $250 a week for me, $250 a week for her from Vince, and her $75 a night for Cornette. At the time, I thought I was like a millionaire.
Huh.
So I was stripped to death to be doing that. But then, and I had to stay to drop the NWA title because Dennis really went out of his way. For what the belt meant and didn't mean, it still meant something to me, to get it. Especially, they could have given it to Eddie Gilbert, they could have given it to Tracy and stuff like that. They ended up, doing it for me. I didn't want to just walk out without losing it back. So that's when we went to the Peel's Palace and I did the thing for Dan, which stands up there with the NWA title, the Kill Auditorium, the Omni, Peel's Palace Bar and Grill. That's what you think of when you think National Wrestling Alliance Championship.
Also, you talked a little bit about going over to Japan to work for Baba again. What was that experience like?
That was, it was cool. There was guys over there that were great too, like Doug Furness and Phil LaFawn were there, and those are the guys that I kind of ended up hanging out with. Even though Phil was a real partier and I was still totally straight at the time, I was just so enamored with the way he'd work. One night, Johnny Smith knocks on my door. He's like, "Well, I need your help." And they come out, and Phil's in the hallway, just sound asleep. So we drug him into his room. The next morning we had to drag him out onto the bus, and he was totally out of it. We're trying to get food into him. So we're showing him Oreo cookies in his mouth. And he's like spitting out the Oreo black and white mixture all over his face. I'm like, oh my God, we're trying to kayfabe Joe Higuchi so he doesn't get in any trouble. He gets in the building and goes out and just worked like a match that, just blew everybody away,
Right.
And me and Johnny Smith worked against Doug and Phil one time at the time I think was the best match that I had had. But Stan Hansen had taken a liking to me because I wasn't going out and partying, and Stan's a very straight guy. So he was like, hey, Fireplug, come hang out with me. So he brought me every night, like his sponsor would buy us food and stuff. So it was kind of cool getting to hang out with Stan. But then he ended up being a little hot at me towards the end of the tour. The night before, Budokan Hall was the last night. The night before that, I was in a six-man with Spivey and Steve Williams against Stan, Johnny Smith, and Johnny Ace. So they said, listen, let's try and take it easy because tomorrow's the big show. So let's rib Stan. When he gets in the ring and throws his hat and his rope and stuff, let's get it by us. And then when they go ahead and announce our name, let's all go do the Stan Hansen deal. So I'm like, all right, cool. So they were announcing not like one by one, but they would say your names like fast together and So they say our names together. I go to take the step forward to do the Stan Hansen. Spivey and Doc both take a step backwards. Spivey throws the rope on my neck. Stan puts the hat on my head, and they walk backwards. I'm in the middle of the ring, and Stan Hansen stuff going like, and I just look, and here comes Stan Hansen, just eyes barely looking at me, and just beat the living hell out of me.
Nice. So now you're back in the States and stuff like that. You're working for Vince. What was that experience like in the beginning? Like, what were your initial impressions of the Fed?
I fucking hated it.
Right off the bat?
Right off the fucking bat, I hated it. They, because here I was now, Memphis, I'd learned some from the guys, but I really wasn't used well enough and done anything with being as young as I was to really learn as much. Learned about stuff in the ring, but not much more. But Cornette, really, I hung out with him a lot, and for some reason, guys like Cornette, even though he learned how to be more diplomatic a little bit over the years, but like Eddie Gilbert, those kind of guys, for some reason, enamored me because I just always wanted to be, like I said, like Doug Summers, the guy to make somebody else look good and not be the star. But something about guys like Eddie, who they were, like rebellious and bump the system and stuff. Well, as a kid, you think it's cool to be fucking rebellious. And later on in life, I realized it wasn't all that smart. But and a lot of Jimmy's mannerisms, came off on me because I just thought, you're very, stuff rubs off on you when you're a kid. And I was still like 20 years old, I'm 21 I think at the time. So we get to Vince starts flying us back and forth from Knoxville to New York. Tammy starts doing the live event news thing. And they didn't know what they were doing with me yet. Then they said, we have some great characters. We're going to fly to the New York office to get your costumes made. And this lady's put me in a powder blue singlet with a big thing on the front, like a big explosion or something. I'm like, what the hell am I? And I said, we don't know the name of your character yet. Remember Vince did that deal with that Brady Boone with the mask, like a thunder cat kind of thing? He wanted to be somebody to be like a Mighty Mouse character. A short, like Fireplug kind of guy. And I said, I'm a horrible babyface. And then, I don't really do a lot of high-flying stuff. The stuff I was doing, I did some stuff at the time that was, cool for then, but nothing that was all that spectacular. And I knew I was not a good babyface. Now it's different because when you're established, you can just do your same shit, and if you're doing it to a heel, people cheer you. But I wasn't confident in it. So our first night at TV, they didn't even have a name for us yet. We were Chris and Tammy Team Spirit. And we went out, and she was formerly a cheerleader, but this was much earlier in life. And when you have a partner doing stunts, the guy throwing you up usually knows what the fuck he's doing. I had no idea what I was doing. So we're there all afternoon. I'm in this fucking stupid cape and these Shazam things on my arms and stuff. And we had to go out, and her outfit ended up looking pretty much the same. We had to go out, and all afternoon we're practicing this entrance. And I'm just getting hot. I'm like, I'm here to fucking wrestle, not do an entrance. Which, now I understand that was much more important than the match was, but I just was a wise ass trying to be a rebel back then. So I'm walking around, and I'm kicking my cape and blowing my nose in it, and I'm cursing like Cornette. He's like, what's wrong with you? I said, when I yell like him, I all of a sudden I get a southern accent. And so I'm yelling, these stupid motherfuckers. And Rene Goulet comes and gives me and Reno Riggins the match. He said, we just want you to have a match. Just do a bunch of spots that don't make any sense. I said, well, why the fuck am I going to do that? I took all this time. Now I think I kind of know what I'm doing. You want me to do something that makes no sense? And they said, well, that's what Vince wants. I said, well, why? Well, it's not my fucking job to ask why. My job as an employee is to do what you're told. But me, like a dick, asked why. They're apparently going to cut it up and make a music video out of it or something to show me doing some cool things. I didn't really have any cool things that I did. So Me and Reno Riggins went out. Me and Tammy did our entrance. That was horrible. My cape like flopped over my face, and I couldn't fucking get it off. And then me and Reno did a bunch of spots. He's going under a leapfrog, and he slips and he tore his groin. It was fucking horrible. So then we go home, and Jim Ross is like, well, we'll give you a call. I'm like, man, these checks are going to stop. I'm not going back. Like, maybe Bob will take me back, and I'll just stay here in Tennessee. I was so fucking hot. And then he ends up calling me. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and Buddy Landell had called me at like 5:30 for what I don't know. I was like, Buddy, I'm sleeping. I hung up the phone. 4 half hour later, I'm like, what the fuck do you want? It's Jim Ross. It's like, oh my God. He's like, Chris, he's like, you okay? I'm like, I thought it was Buddy Landell. He's like, well, fuck, why you hate Buddy? I'm like, I don't, but it's 6 o'clock in the morning. And he's like, how do you feel about being a heel? I was like, oh, thank you so much. So we went back up, and they gave us, our new gimmick, and which I wasn't thrilled with being called Skip, but again, I think it might have been smarter for me to have stayed in Japan and stayed in Smoky Mountain a little bit longer, because while my work might have been good enough to be there at the time, I wasn't mature enough to be there. You needed to really understand more of what was in the bigger picture to have done it correctly. Had I just maybe kept my mouth shut and paid more attention to just going off the handle immediately, it might have I might have enjoyed it better at the beginning. It ended up being fun though. Like when me and Barry Horowitz were working on the road, and we got to the King of the Ring, and Pat Patterson, hey, he said, you and Barry are having some really good matches. He goes, how would you feel about doing an angle with him? I said, I would feel great about doing anything. He goes, well, he goes, tomorrow we have the great idea, but it's you have to lose to Barry. And Pat Patterson's here trying to tell me why it's okay to lose to Barry Horowitz. And I said, I will, I'll gladly do it. We went ahead and did it, and he beat me. And I was supposed to get my win back like on the second hour, which is going to be taped that same day. And me and Barry and Pat were sitting there, and we were like, man, could we like keep it going? Figuring, because Barry wasn't used all that often back then. He said, man, if we keep this going, I can like get booked, because nobody had any guarantee. You just got paid if you worked. So, and I mean, I was working a lot at the time because I was new, and there was only so many of us employed there at the time, not like now. But Barry, needed to get booked, so we said, yes, let's keep it, let's draw it out. So we ended up getting a few pay-per-views out of it, and it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, and that was when I started enjoying myself there.
Right. Who'd you travel with on the road there?
We went through a lot of different stages. When we first started, it was a real motley crew. There was like Dr. Tom and Del Rey with the Barbarian and Mantar. After that, we rode with Hakushi and Spicoli, and with Lex and Davey we rode with for a while. And then when Shane was there, it was me, Shane, Tammy, and PJ. It was I think that probably we were always with PJ and always with Louie, and then for a long time with Davey and Lex were our longest partners.
Right. When you started teaming up with Tom Pritchard, what was that like in the Body Donnas?
I felt we had remained kind of close, but Tom's always he was like a real private guy. Like I was the only guy in Knoxville to ever walk past the threshold of his door into his apartment, and that's as far as I got. I mean, he was a bit of a strange bird back then. Tom was, and I was just so happy to get to team with him because we had become friends, and I had admired his work, and I always thought he was so underrated for as good as he was. But I felt so bad that he had to come in, a guy that I looked up to had to come in and shave off his hair that he loved and had to look like me. And we got to and Bruce had called me and said, we're going to put you and Tom together, and I was ecstatic about it. We get to Hershey Park 2 days later, and Bruce gives me this video camera, so you got to go with Tom to the barber shop. I said, for what? He goes, you're taping something. I'm like, what are we doing? Tom's like, just shut up and follow me. And we walk into the barber shop, and I sit down, and some ladies looking at his hair going, oh my God, sir, this beautiful hair. Oh, it's so nice. What do you need done? I'm sitting behind him. He goes, I need to look like that. And my job was to sit there and videotape it just for the Pritchard home family reel, him getting his hair cut off. And almost like on cue, Bob Backlund, who we rode with him for a little bit too, and he's a fun guy, but he was always Mr. Backlund. I mean, he was out of his mind. Bob comes walking in. I don't know if what he was getting cut. He had no hair on his head hardly. He comes walking in the door during the middle of it, constantly in the bow tie. On the airplane, he wouldn't even lean against the back of the seat. He would just be sitting like this the whole time. He comes walking in, bow tie and all, sees Tom get his hair cut, and it's on the tape that Bruce still has. He just walks in, this is an atrocity, an abomination, and just yelling, just turned around and walked out. It was fantastic.
Insane. So as far as the Body Donna stuff, were you for or against it? You didn't really like that idea? Or
No,
you liked teaming with Tom, but...
I felt bad because me and Louie were really on a roll. We had done some good stuff with the Guns and with Hakushi and Barry. But then they turned Louie babyface, and we kind of both knew that after our little very short deal, like 2 weeks was over, that they didn't know what they were gonna do with them. And I was still to death to be teaming with Tom because we were so close. But I felt bad for Louie more than anything. But I knew I could learn more from working alongside Tom.
Who were some of the guys that you worked with when you worked with Tom?
There wasn't many teams up there, man. We worked against the Guns, the Godwins, and the New Rockers. We had some classics with the Bushwhackers and Techno Team 2000,
right.
Eric Watts and Chad Fortune. But it was pretty much the Guns and the Godwins, and then we did those 4-man deals with the Rockers in there too.
Right. From there, where'd you end up? I mean, you're still in WWE. What led to your departure?
Me and Tom were working with the Guns in the Garden, and at the Royal Rumble, me and Tom, we did a deal where Tammy took a bump off the apron, and Billy went out like he was being the cowboy gentleman kind of guy to go see how she was. And me and Tom jumped off with a dreaded double axe handle to the back of Billy's neck, and the next couple of days, like, man, my arm is killing me. I have no feeling on my arm. My arm is now numb. I can't lift it. We had broken his neck with the dreaded double axe handle. When then they went ahead and came back, and we're working with them, and we're in the Garden. It was like, I think August 9th or something like that, 6th or 9th. And they did that deal where Bart holds you on the side slam, and Billy came with the leg drop from the top. And it was the end of it was like a long run. It was like 30, 40 days or something like that. And the house was just the shits. Everybody was tired and lazy, and probably half sewed up too. And I ended up taking the bump, and I cracked my neck. And they took me to the hospital, and they said, that I broke the spinous process off of my C4 and C5 and had a fracture in my C5. And so I was laying at home, scared to death that I mean, not too much cared about my neck, more or less thought I was now going to, lose my job. And but they put me on the talent pool payroll, which just got paid on the size of the house. So like our spot on the card being in the middle there, if we were on on a Garden show, we can get whatever, a couple $1,000. And some shows like Del Mar, California, I remember we got $75. And so talent pool was like you're paid on the house, but you're not on the show, so you're getting like $20 for this show, something for that. So it was not really money coming in. I mean, she was getting paid, but they would still cut us almost in half. And then I said, no, I'm okay. I can still come and work. So Bruce called and said, hey, we put the belts on. They had put Tammy did the deal where she went with the Godwins, then with the Guns, and then she stopped managing and fired the Guns. That whole deal. They're doing the other stuff with her and put the belts on Davey and Owen. So I said, they need to have a good match, and we have no fucking teams. Can you work? I said, yeah, I'll be fine. So you and Tom work with Davey and Owen at the Hershey Park. That was the night that Taz came over the railing with the Fear, Fear's Taz, all that kind of stuff. And so they said, well, we're going to repackage you and this and that. And because Tom, for some reason or other, they were phasing him out of even working, but he got the job, teaching the guys. So they said, we're going to repackage you and this and that. But Tom was moving from Houston up to Stanford. So while he was gone, they let me run the school. So I had Akam Albrecht was the Brackus, Mark Henry, and Rocky in the class. And then when Tom came back, I was there with him for like about a month. And I would go to TV, and they were like, okay, skipping the Sultan, you get camel clutched, skipping this guy, you just get beat. And I didn't care about getting beat, but I was like, man, how are they going to repackage me if I'm just still on TV every week, getting beat, and your money was still depending on how often you got booked, and just being the job guy, you weren't getting booked. So we were in Indianapolis at Raw, and they wanted me to lose to Cactus when the Mankind thing was starting. I said, oh, maybe this is cool. I said, me and Cactus had some pretty good matches, and Jerry Briscoe said, we really don't want a good match. So I know it's not supposed to be competitive. I said, but can I just get in, one thing, and maybe, I bump him and put him on the top, go over the Frankensteiner, have him give me the mandible gimmick right up there, and just bump me right off with it, and and tap me out or whatever the thing is. He's like, it's too spectacular. And and I wasn't already in the right frame of mind then, because we were all experimenting with things, and I was already pissed off at at shit. I was in my still Eddie Gilbert rebellious mode. So I'm like, they don't, they could just use anybody to fucking just go in there and get fucking beat. They're just fucking with me. So I called Paulie right from the production room and say, man, can I start work? He's like, yeah, you can start Saturday if you want. So I'm quitting. And I walked up to Vince and gave my notice. And as I was in the middle of doing it, Jim Ross comes out of the production room. He's like, Candido, Paul Lee is on the phone for you. And they weren't, Vince wasn't going to let me give my notice. Not that I was that valuable to the company. But, I said, well, I'm done. I'm going to go work for somebody else. He thought for some reason I was going to go to WCW and do something. Because there was a heat with me and Sean and stuff at the end. I was going to go and say something. I was like, no, I'm just going to go work for Paulie. He was like, oh, all right, take it easy, And there was, no hard feelings. But I left, obviously the way I left was, was the wrong way to do it. They were letting me still, work at the school and train the guys, which is a job that now I was trying to get and couldn't get that I had when I was 24 years old. So, pretty much everything I did up there was incorrect. So, the whole time I was there, everything I did besides stuff I did in the ring was wrong.
We're talking about WWF and your departure and stuff like that. You mentioned briefly that you had heat with Sean. What was that all over?
Well, we were more, when our names are together, we're more known as not getting along, but there was a majority of the time, we rode with them guys too for a while. And the heat with Sean just started because, there was rumors about him and Tanya, but it started even before that just because he can be a dick sometimes, And it started one night we were in Springfield, Massachusetts, and there was a lumberjack match with Sean and Brett and, all of us on the outside. And the finish was when Sean takes the bump over, all the heels and their baby faces, we all go with our guy. And just Owen and Davey, I think, were supposed to get to Sean and throw him back in for Brett to beat him. Well, they go into the spot of the match, and here comes Sean. He takes a big bump over the top and lands right at my feet. And now, Phineas, not the fastest man in the world, is way over there. That's not his fault. I could have ran and got him, but he falls at my feet. Davey and Owen are over there, fucking around. They always, where's the house shows? They're fucking, playing practical jokes on each other or something. I'm like, well, damn, somebody better kick him. So I fucking kick him, and he looks up and starts yelling at me. Stopped selling and was hot. We got in the back, and 1, 2, 3 kid did the same thing. He was next to me, so we both put the boots to him. He got back and screamed at both of us, which in the big picture of things, as I got older and when I went to ECW and I was, not in his same role, but like a guy who was higher up on the card, and we were going through problems there, and guys lower on the card would do something stupid, and I was a hothead too. So sometimes you would yell at somebody. But when somebody yells at you, you act and you fucking yell back, which didn't really get over with him too well. And then he thought I wanted to fight him, so we're going out to the parking lot that night, and he was like, "Oh, you want to hit me?" And and Vince and Hunter are holding him back, and I'm like, "I don't want to fight anybody." I'm like, "But don't fucking yell at me." If I was wrong, I was wrong. What the fuck do you want me to do? You landed right at my fucking feet, and we just became, business was really bad at the time, so everybody wasn't making fantastic money. And there was all the pressure was being put on his shoulders because he was a guy that was supposed to be drawing the houses, and just through no fault of anybody's, there was not many people there. So I guess he was feeling the pressure of being in that spot, and it was a spot that he felt he deserved for a longer time than he's finally getting the shot that he thought he deserved. Here I was a young, abrasive guy, pretty much the same. I think we didn't get along because we were too much the same person. We were both young, and we were both fucking wise asses, and we both thought we were really good at what we did. But he was, a couple years older than me, so was already in that spot, and I was in the spot that he used to be in as the young guy underneath, who people are kind of saying is good. So when the guy above you, who's supposed to, who's the top guy, yells at you, then you're a dick right back to him. So we just didn't mix well after that.
What was the actual story with him and Tammy and how would you deal with all that?
Well, it's first of all, when there's a girl in the business, you're surrounded by guys who are on the road for a long period of time, who are also full of testosterone, and we're, from the very fact that at some point in our lives, we say that we want to be professional wrestlers, we're obviously something fucking mentally wrong with us. Okay, so that's number one. You get all those guys and you put us together, and we have to travel around together in, in a cosmetic business and stuff. There's different people act different ways. And then you throw a few girls into the mix, but back then you threw just one girl into the mix. There was going to inevitably be something said, and you have nobody else. You're a guy on the road. You have your wife, your girlfriend's home. There may not be a rat in the town that day. You have to look at somebody, and she's the thing closest to you. So there's going to inevitably be rumors and stuff said and whatnot. But the thing with Sean is he was 24 hours a day the Heartbreak Kid. He wasn't just a guy who played a character. He was, he thought, or whether he really did think it, whether he was just doing it just to fuck with me, or just he legitimately tried to act like the Heartbreak Kid 24 hours a day. So I mean, at first it didn't bother me because it's common sense that shit's gonna be said. But we were together fucking 24 hours a day. I mean, even when I'm in the ring, she's right fucking next to me. So I mean, if the only time anything does happen, and I have the tape of it, there was also a goat involved, and I'll sell it to you for a lot more money. But I mean,
So there is no tape of her and Sean, because there's rumors that there is a tape.
no.
Okay.
Well, if there was, wouldn't somebody fucking have it? Of all people, wouldn't you fucking have it?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you did, wouldn't it be in your newsletter gimmick and you'd be fucking selling it?
Basically.
You know?
So the rumors of her and Sean are pretty much not true.
Well, I'll put it this way. I mean, I would, like to just believe that nothing happened. If something, like, I'm sure if something did happen, they're not going to fucking tape it, for God's sake. I mean, that would be just stupid to fucking
Right.
do. But they're...
Did it ever get to the point where you actually had to question Tammy on and be like, yo, this is what I'm hearing?
No, I mean, well, you question people are married for 40 years, and they're like, and they go out to dinner with their secretary or something, the wife gets hot. It's just human nature. So, I mean, especially in being, and being young and abrasive too. I mean, so of course we questioned it, and it caused arguments between us and stuff like that. But I mean, there's nothing she could have done about it. I mean, there's stuff is going to be said because she was the only girl, plus she was the top girl, and Sean's the top guy. So like, and in the smart fans' eyes too, I remember like people would be like, yelling stuff to me because in their eyes it made no sense for the girl who was like the top girl in the business. Well, why the fuck is she going out with Skip? You know what I mean? It didn't seem like a perfect match to anybody. You know what I mean? But you couldn't get around stuff being said. It was just obvious that it was going to fucking have to happen.
What about the Davey Boy Smith rumors? There's all rumors about her and Davey Boy.
Yeah, and I didn't even hear that one until recently, and the poor guy's already been gone for quite a long time. We rode with Davey all the time, and we were always together. But Davey wasn't even a guy that would he never ratted around or anything like that either. Because Diana would legitimately fucking be able to kick his ass. She stretched me, Dustin, and Stone Cold one night in the Cow Palace in San Francisco in 35 seconds. Like, Stu was teaching me this move, Skip. Can I show it to you? I'm like, yeah, Diana. It's like, here. She put me in it. It's like, try and get out. I tried to get out, and she, boom, had me. And then Dustin's like, God, Doom did it to him, and Steve, you guys are fucking stupid. And he checked him out, too. So Davey didn't fuck around with anybody.
All right. Now, as far as you talked about Paul Heyman earlier on, how you were talking to Paul on the phone, how did you get to know Paul?
Well, I know Paul since I was a kid, hanging around, putting up the rings, and him hanging out, taking pictures and stuff like that. And when my grandfather and Larry were running together, Paul was doing the Wrestling Press International stuff. So I mean, I would help him type the shit up, and then he was however, not that much older, than me. He was still a con man at 18. He was like, okay, you take these two, and you go, these are the last two left, and I'd sell them, and then I'd go back, get two more. I walk around the same building, at the Carteret High School gym, trying to sell the programs, and they were always the last two left for 3 hours that night, But, so I had known him for quite a while. We had remained friends when I was doing the rings with Klondike and Gordon in WCW. He was there, and he would help me out and stuff like that, and he would call at strange times. I still kept this, the old answer machines that have an actual cassette tape.
Yeah.
He left me a message one night. There was a show in Asbury Park that I went to, and did the ring, and Gary Juster had Tammy doing the ring jacks and stuff like that. And that was another show that Ricky Morton and Kevin were trying to get me on. They ended up not working. And I was kind of fucking hot about it, And not hot as much as my feelings were hurt. So I got home. Paulie left me this 5-minute message that I still kept, and when I get upset, I still sit there and listen to it. It's ironic that it's Paulie that sometimes cheers me up, but it was a different time.
When you came into the company, I think your first match was with Mikey, right? For November?
With
Spike.
Oh, okay,
Spike.
That's right. What are your memories of?
Well, I knew a lot of guys there already from being, local guys like Taz and stuff like that. Spike, I didn't know, and I remembered that I have to get over somewhat strong coming from being a Skip, and Sabu was just I just fucking squash him this, and then Taz was like, oh, he's a good guy, but we only had a couple minutes, so Spike just said, whatever you want to do, go ahead and do it. So I, pretty much, that was when first time I had given the power bomb since Bobby Blaze was that night from the top rope to Spike, and he just fucking flew. We had done it in WWF, but nobody wanted to take it from me because I was never going to win number one anyway. So I couldn't really use it because who the hell would be able to get up from it? As I learned that night with Bobby was the wrong thing to do. And plus the rings in WWF at the time were so hard. But at the Survivor Series, when they had there was the Body Donnas versus the Horowitz underdogs, and 1, 2, 3 Kid was winning, and I was the last one eliminated before him. And Marty was beating me. I said, man, Marty, I said, you beat me with this? He's like, a top rope powerbomb. How do you do that? I'm like, we stand up there and you powerbomb me. Like, do you want to go out there and try it? He's like, no, I stayed up and powerbombed you. Okay. Went back to sleep. We went out and fucking just did the move perfect. And then we just started doing it because we would get heat because we'd have those 4-man tag teams. And Jack Landon was like, you guys got 9 minutes. I'm like, how could you go 9 minutes with the whole entire tag team roster? And he was like, so we would just go in and just go through our spots as fast as we can, which was, again, the wrong thing to do, but just wanting to buck the system so much, we'd go ahead and do it. And like the first 5 minutes into the match, Marty would fucking powerbomb me off the top rope just for the sake of getting it in and for having fun, and we'd still end up, staying through the whole fucking match.
What were your initial impressions of the ECW locker room?
It was, well, coming from a place, when I left WWF, I wasn't, a real happy fella. I mean, I was aggravated by, which I like back again. A lot of it was my own fault, but I still wasn't in a real good mood. So I went from being around guys who a lot of them I didn't get along with, well, at least the guys who mattered I didn't get along with at the time, to guys that were everybody was like, was a family and real cool. So I mean, it was like a whole new place, real like night and day.
Has Paulie changed over time as far as when you came to ECW? Now he's your boss.
No, he's always been fucking strange. He was never any different. I remember my little brother, he was 14 years old, and he came with me that first night when I worked with Spike, and Paulie's sitting there and he's like, now, it's like, you have the ball, take the ball and run. And I came back, I mean, he pumped me up and we're in the car way home. My brother's like, that Paul guy's fucking weird. And I mean, but he has a way of getting in your head, he didn't treat me, there was no boss-employee relationship, he was still a friend.
Right.
See that you were friends with Caroluzzo. What was Dennis's opinion when they dropped the NWA title with Shane Douglas? Since you were close to Caroluzzo at the time, like what happened about? What did he think about?
He was flipping out about it,
right.
Of course. But I mean, it ended up being good for me because that's how I ended up getting the belt.
Right.
If Shane threw it down, he did the other tournament and put it on me.
Right.
But when I went to, Dennis called me. He was so heartbroken that I would leave WWF and go to Paulie and not go to him. Because you can come and be my booker. Dennis, be your booker. You run once a month. What am I gonna do? I mean, I don't know how to be a fucking booker. But I need to work often and make a living. And he was what hot me. We didn't talk for a little while. His feelings were really hurt that I would go ahead and go to Paulie instead of Excalibur Promotions.
Did he know that he was getting set up that night of that NWA tournament, or no? That was
No.
the total.
He had heard about it, but of course he didn't want to believe it. And then he thought that it was all part of an angle. I had him do the interview and everything afterwards like that. But after it was done and 2 days passed, and he realized that he really was fucked. But that was like oil and water. Dennis and Todd and Paulie were just not made to work together.
Right. What was your impressions of Todd Gordon?
I really never got to know him all that well. By the time I got there, he was hardly ever around. And he was only around like in Philly, and he kind of hung with his clique, with Sandman and those guys, and and I hung with my guys.
Now, was ECW? It was a lot. You were in ECW when it first started. Paulie wasn't in at all when you were in.
No, well, Eddie Gilbert brought Paulie in like as a manager, and and helped him. Had Paulie helping us do promos and stuff, and me and Johnny Hotbody were the Suicide Blondes, and were the Eastern Tag Team Champions. And then go to Smoky Mountain, Salvatore Bellomo broke my arms, and they put Chris Michaels.
Right.
With Hotbody, like a Freebird, something, 3 of us.
But he had black hair. That was the whole gimmick.
He was supposed to be blonde.
Right.
And we tried to make it blonde, and it was just coming out like red and orange, and he didn't really have a lot of hair on top, so he was nervous. So Eddie said, "You know what? Just put it jet black and just pretend it's blonde."
Right. Well, now when you came back after the Spike thing, what was like your first program?
I did a deal with Mikey, where me and Mikey worked with the Eliminators. And I did a couple spots with John and Perry, and then tag Mikey in, and then do the thing when he came to tag me. I had something in my eye, and this was I was fixing a turnbuckle or something. So that set up November to Remember for me and Mikey, and then then I worked with Spicoli a few times, and that's how we kind of leaded into me and Shane and Brian Lee doing a triple threat deal together.
Mm-hmm. Whose idea was that?
Well, now that Benoit and Malenko were gone, Shane still wanted to have a triple threat.
Right.
And that was, and the way Paulie put it together just ended up me and Brian. And it was fun that me and Brian had been together so much before already, so we really knew each other well. So it was always, Shane defend the title, and me and Brian had tag matches. And
Didn't you come together? Didn't you fight like Did you work Spicoli? It was Brian Lee and Spicoli. They had that match in the arena, and then
Yeah,
didn't you come down or something?
Yeah, because we taped the commentary in Ron Buffone's basement where I was sick, and then I was there match coming, so I asked Joey if I could do commentary, because they were both former partners of mine. So that's when I ran in and we beat on Louie, and then here came the Pit Bulls, and then there came Shane, and we beat the three of them down. That's when we finally did our three-finger salute.
Right. What was Shane? What was Shane's opinion about how you left WWF? Because he left the same way. Did you guys have that?
Yeah, we had the fucking miserable bitching thing together. We would sit there and bitch and complain about stuff all the time. So we were perfect together. We were two miserable bastards.
Right.
Now, did you have a hard time being on the road and Tammy being separated from you?
No, because she wasn't on the road anymore. They would just bring her to TV, and then they would just send her to appearances and stuff. And she would go to the studio and do all voiceovers and some on-camera stuff in front of the blue screen and that. And she would only go to make the TVs.
You would still go to some of the shows, I think, with her, right?
Yeah, they why I don't know, but they were still giving me tickets to go to TV. I don't know if it was they were doing so much with her, and Paulie was already secretly on the payroll. So maybe they're like, well, what do we do about this deal? Was she going to leave because we're having a lot of stuff invested in her? And Paulie was like, well, if you just fucking let Chris come to TV, and this is I'm just assuming this, and let him act like he's doing something, he'll be happy. So they stuck me in the pre-tape room. And I would sit with downtown Bruno, and and they gave me Furnace and LaFon again. We ended up together to help teach them how to do promos. I doubt there was ever fucking film in the camera, or they probably just a cardboard cutout of the guy standing there like this to make it seem like I was I was doing something. I never got paid for anything, but they still let me go to the TV with her and gave me tickets to go and hang out. And the weird thing was everybody treated me much nicer that I was gone than than now that I was back but not really working for them, and which was probably a dumb thing to do, to have me go and do that, because all of a sudden I got to hang out in a different way with the Jim Rosses and stuff like that, because I would just kind of insinuate myself into places that I probably shouldn't have been, but for some reason they let me do it. So I became kind of chummy with them, and we're in Calgary when Taka and Sasuke had that match, the Calgary Stampede pay-per-view, and Jim Ross came to me and said, hey, we really like the stuff you're doing on Paulie's TV, and now with these guys coming in, we're going to do a light heavyweight thing, and a lot of indie light heavyweight guys, and we just want to come in and do that same character and stuff. And me being the fucking dick that I was, thinking I was important because I got to work in ECW and hang out at the back of TV and give guys to a fucking empty camera. I was like, what? WWE's always been a big man territory. The belt's just not going to work, so I really don't feel like coming in. Like I was hot shit. Like, what? Nah, I really don't want to. Huh. So that was kind of, another asshole move I made.
Right. Now, you actually helped Paul with a lot of booking, too, at one point. Or you helped write storylines and stuff?
Yeah, we would, I don't know if it was just because I could put up with Paul more than other people. I mean, it's something I always wanted to do anyway. I mean, every minute of my life kind of revolves around this business. I wanted to learn everything I could. And Paulie likes to just babble constantly 24 hours a day about wrestling, too. So if there was somebody that didn't mind sitting on the phone with him from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., then so be it, and you got to help him out do stuff. So I freely volunteered to do that, and then I go to the studio and help him do the TVs and stuff. And I mean, Dreamer was always there, Shane was always there, other guys that really, really wanted to be involved and and learn more stuff. So that was fun. And then because I was still going to Vince's TVs, Paulie had me. I would when we did the thing when Sabu and Rob were WWF and they had the banner and stuff like that. I mean, I went to the office, and they gave me the banner. I was kind of like just because I was around those guys more often, although Paulie could have done it very well without me, I was just around them, so I kind of got to carry messages back and forth, and I thought I was fucking hot shit, And when we went to Montreal with the Shawn Brett deal that night, we walked in. I mean, I had no reason to be there early, but Tammy had to be there a little bit earlier. We walked in, the production meeting was over, and Vince starts yelling, "Where have you been?" And I'm looking around like, man, he's hot at somebody. He goes, "I'm talking to you. Where have you been?" I'm like, I don't know. It's a bingo hall. I don't know why. He's like, "Where is that tape?" I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." He goes, we held the production meeting up for you." I'm like, "For me?" He's like, and walks away. I'm like, what the hell? I go and call Paulie from the production room. Leave a message. I'm like, dude, Vince is yelling at me about some kind of tape. Call me back. So I'm just standing by the curtain watching them hook all the stuff up. And Tony Chimmel, the ring announcer, comes over. He's like, "Where's Candido?" I'm like, "I'm here." What? He goes, "There's a Raul on the phone for you?" I go, "What?" I'm on the phone. I go, "Hello?" He goes, "This Chris?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "This is Raul?" I said, "Who the fuck's Raul?" He goes, "It's me." I'm like, "Paul, what the fuck is wrong with you? What's going on?" He was like, well, it was before our November to Remember. We had cut a promo because it was their, what they call their Survivor Series, like Gang Rules or something like that. So we did some promo like knocking that whole thing, and apparently they were going to air our promo on Survivor Series to help us plug November to Remember. And Paul had just told me this. Well, why did you? He's yelling at me about some tape. He goes, they're doing something with Sean and Brett, so I didn't think he'd want to be bothered by it. So I was like, and this is in the afternoon. I'm like, what are they doing with Sean and Brett? So I mean, I don't know if the whole thing was really at work or it wasn't work, but there was apparently Paulie knew something underhanded and tricky was going on.
Right. Huh. That's great. What are some of the ideas that you're actually responsible for in ECW as far as like your booking concepts that got used? It was
never ideas. It was like he let me do finishes and stuff like that in matches where, like, one of the things about people like, oh, ECW, Paulie was a genius, this and that. He was a genius in that he let the boys do what they wanted to do. I mean, there wasn't a guy who would come and say, okay, you're doing this. We would just get together and put together our own matches, put together the finish and stuff. But when stuff mattered at certain points and certain things needed to get across, Paulie was like, maybe if, you just like, hey, tell the guys, hey, I'm about to try this, and that. I mean, I wasn't like an office guy with a fucking pencil behind my ear and a paper, walking around trying to be important. But we would just sit there and come up with, I mean, nothing that was ever, I would write something out and give it to him and say, okay, we'll do this. It was always like a team effort of, we'd sit around eating Chinese food at Ron Buffone, the camera guy's house, with, Dreamer and Shane and Paulie. We would all just throw stuff out, and with all of us together, it just would become something,
As far as actually Tabby would come to some shows too, right? But
she was enjoying herself more there than she was in WF at the time actually too, because another thing we didn't realize at the time, what they were trying to do with her, being on the Singled Out and the Entertainment Tonight and all this crossover stuff, they were trying to get her to be a crossover person. Like, they offered her the Playboy deal previous to Sable, but she said no, not because she was upset about the Playboy thing, but it was because they kind of told her, you're doing it and you're going to do it. You're full nudity for this money, this amount of money for partial, this amount for this. It wasn't like, hey, do you wanna? And plus, she was like, didn't want to do, I think in her mind she really did kind of want to do the other stuff and not just do wrestling. She enjoyed being on the Entertainment Tonights and doing other TV shows and all. But I was like, you're not a fucking actress. You're the female Jim Cornette. You're a heel manager. You're this. And I would constantly be on the phone arguing with Jim Ross. Like, why is she doing fucking? She was coming out modeling a fucking T-shirt. You can just get some stupid rap to do that. I mean, she should be fucking, managing, cutting promos and stuff. And he was like, that's not what we're doing. But never said to me, by the way, who the fuck are you to be calling me and yelling at me when you don't even fucking work here?
Right.
He put up with a lot of bullshit from me. But so she enjoyed herself more at ECW because Paulie kind of gave me free reign to do what I wanted. So she would come and, and I mean, not for any payday, just, they would use her in my finishes and all kind of stuff, because when people see me, they started chanting her name anyway. So when she would come and, run out to get the easy pop and some kind of false finish, it was fun to do.
Did it ever bother you at all?
What?
When they chanted her name or not?
At least they were fucking chanting something. Because,
right.
I mean, the ECW crowd can be, they can be pretty stiff. Well, they always, chanted good stuff to me too. I mean, later they would say some pretty nasty shit. But like when I first started, they were, Skip is dead and chanting my name and stuff. But I mean, how could they not fucking cheer for her? She was the hottest thing in the fucking business. How could they? You expect them not to say it?
Right.
When she was out there, when you were with the company and she still was with WWF, and she would like come out on stage and everything, like in between, did she get heat from WWF? Because it was all over the internet, I think, at that time. And was Paul kind of like telling her to go get seen, kind of?
No, she would go, just
on her own?
She would just go in like a fucking baseball hat and jeans and just, sit up there with guys we were friends with, like fucking Taz and Bubba and stuff, watch the show, because she legitimately likes good wrestling. She was seeing more good wrestling in ECW than she was at WWF.
Right.
She would get heat because when they were doing like the Live Wire show, that it was actually live on Sunday mornings, and they would do the deal where fans would call in, and it was a shoot live. Sometimes Kevin Dunn would call in and try and plant questions to get the people talking what they want them to talk about, but they would let one or two people through for real, and they would start asking stuff about other things, and she would like mention my name. They asked her about like how come WWF doesn't have cruiserweights like WCW, and she was like, I don't know, that's stupid. I think they should have guys like and mention my name along with Benoit Malenko and stuff. And they're in the control room like, oh my god. And I remember Spicoli was there with me that day, and we're just rolling around laughing because we were just fucking heat seekers to begin with,
Right.
And then it was the day of November to Remember, and it's like, welcome to Live Wire. And Tammy's like, dude, it's going to be November to Remember weekend. Like, Jim Ross fucking throws, like, Jesus Christ, you guys always have to fuck around? I'm like, I guess, I don't know.
What are some of the matches that really stand out in your career in ECW? Like anything with Lance, Storm? Or?
I mean, Lance was always fucking fun. I think that doesn't get, that's the thing I'm hot about, it. That shit doesn't get noticed as much, because me and Lance as a team, I think, were such a perfect match, because Lance being zero personality as he had, and me being so fucking retarded and trying to be over compensating for it, and and the deal, we hated each other but still were a team, and would work a tag match and then go right into our fucking singles match in the middle of a tag match, nail each other, do a spot with each, we'd bump each other, then the opponent would come and we'd nail them, go back to fight each other. It was just, I think it was a great story, and it was just so much fun to work with him and the guys we were getting to work against, like Tracy and Guido and those kind of, I mean, it was just, I'm kind of upset that he gets overlooked a lot,
Basically, after ECW, you stayed there until the end. I mean, did you see it going down?
Well, I was kind of there till the end.
Right.
Paulie, for whatever reason, I don't know if he told me this, but what comes out of his mouth and what he really thinks are two usually completely different things. If he's really even thinking anything, or if he's just talking, I'd tell you this, he treated us fantastically. I made more money with Paulie than I did with WWF. I mean, at least as far as a guarantee basis.
Right.
And we were all taking jobs to try and help the company out because we all wanted to stay there. We're all, yay team. So when I started doing the travel stuff and using my credit card and all, I mean, when my bill would come every month, I mean, American Express gives you like a copy of the actual tickets and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'd copy everything and itemize shit out. I'd go and give it to Paul. He would just flip to the last page, write me a check every month. I mean, it was like 15 grand, 20 grand, like no big deal. Just throw it in his fucking bag and never look at it again. And the checks never bounced. I mean, until the end when I got stuck with a lot of the stuff. I mean, he treated us all, really, really well. And I mean, it was a blast over there. But then he was treating me like he was saying, like, oh, you're supposed to, I want to just do the TV, so I need somebody to run the shows on the road. Why are the boys going to listen to you, and, when you're getting fucked up? I said, the entire fucking locker room is fucked up. I said, there's, Rob and Sabu did a photo shoot for High Times Magazine with 9 pounds of pot a foot away from us, and you're yelling at me for doing what I'm doing, and I don't, why he, got on my case and nobody else's, I don't know. So he suspended me a few times, and would still pay me while I was off, and then I brought me back. I did the deal with where Carino brought me out. I did the thing with Taz. I came back one time and worked with Sabu in November to Remember, and he was just paying me the whole time and only using me sporadically here and there. And I don't know what his real reason for it was. I've tried to talk about it with him 100 times, and somehow it winds up. He tries to make an analogy that Cyclone Negro and Pampero Forpo had a chain match once in Dallas, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And by the time he's done talking, it's 6-7 hours later, and all I want to do is go home.
Right,
so I don't know what the reason was ever for it, but I saw it was going down at the end, but already by this time, my brain wasn't always working, so I wasn't realizing the fact that that checks were slowing down, that I wasn't being used, and I was pretty much just semi-coherent when it was time to go to work, which became less and less for whatever reason. The rest of the time, I didn't even know what was going on much, of anything.
When Tammy finally got let go of WWF, did you like her when she was on the road full time with you? Did Paulie take her right away, or?
Yeah, well, and I never got fired. And I quit, and she quit also. They brought her to the office and said, "Look, are you not having fun here anymore?" She's like, "No, I'm really not." And Jim said, "Well, we're going to do this with you, and I want to do this." And we left the meeting, and we're already fucked up by the time we got downstairs to the car, and we're like, "Fuck them." You know what we had? We were going to the Heat Wave pay-per-view, and like, let's just fucking quit on the pay-per-view. So she came to the ring with me that night, and Joey Styles said she's now full-time with us. And after the pay-per-view went off the air, everybody was in the ring, she cut a promo saying, "No, fuck them, I'm here with ECW." And Paulie said, "Well, what did you make with Vince last year with your merchandise and everything?" She told him, he said, "Okay, that's all I'll give you." And he fucking paid her, and she only had to go to TV and go to whatever house shows she felt like going to, and otherwise she was just, home.
When was the first time you actually started using drugs? And how'd you get introduced and all that stuff?
I was like super, super straight because I figured, fuck, if I want to be in wrestling, I got to be athletic. I can't like drink or anything. God damn, what the fuck,
Right.
You can't do that if you're going to be a professional wrestler. And then we when we went to WWF, you would kind of hear things, but we were still so new that we got kayfabe and all that stuff that everybody was doing. But then Tammy got her tits done for the first time, and her doctor gave her a whole big sample bag, just samples of Vicodin. She was like, I don't need these. I mean, now we would have been, years later, we would have been fighting over them trying to get to them. So we were like, Tom, do you know what these things are? Do you want? He's like, but give them to me. Like, you know. And then it was a time that we were riding with Sean and the kid and Scott Hall and stuff like that. I was like, fucking man, that hurt. I can't sleep. And Scott's like, do you ever have a Xanax? And I'm like, no, not really. I really don't, take anything. And he like gave us one, and we were like fighting. Should we take it or not? And I'm like yelling at her, like, I don't think we should. She's like, well, what are you gonna do? I don't know. What do you? So I called Tom. Like, Tom, what do you think I should do? He's like, just give it to me. I'll get rid of it. and then we were in Prince George Island. And we had to go from Prince George to Vancouver, Vancouver to Toronto, and go through customs, and then pick up our bags again, go from Toronto to Newark, and then go from Newark home. And that was the first time I ever took anything. Davey Boy gave me a big Xanax bar in Prince George Island. All I knew was I woke up on my living room floor in Mattawa, New Jersey, and that started a little bit of a run there.
As far as like, so the WWF is when you first, got into the drugs and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was pretty much. It's almost. It sounds bad, but it almost is a necessity when you're working that often and taking that many bumps, especially in that ring. Then was so fucking hard.
Right.
And the travel was just like made no particular sense. You're from like Seattle, and Binghamton, and fucking San Francisco, and then here, and you're so revved up. When you come out of the ring and stuff, you can't just go back to the hotel and close your eyes and go to bed. And you got to be at the airport at 7 o'clock in the morning anyway, so you need help going to bed. And then, and I was never a big upper guy, but then it helped, kind of help getting up and then help not hurt. And then just stuff that becomes a habit just becomes a habit. You know what I mean? Whether it's taking something or just you have a routine that you do during the day, just becomes. I mean, if you do something regularly, it just becomes habit forming. And when your schedule is to get up, go to the airport, go to the gym, fly somewhere, go to this. It just became part of the habit, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it if you can control it and do it properly. But I just later on found out that I couldn't control it and do it properly.
I was going to ask you, what do you think made drugs so appealing to you?
Because they're fucking fun.
Huh.
Seriously, I mean, if you can't go to sleep and your body hurts, and you take something to go to sleep and you wake up and your body feels better, but then also, like I said before, everybody in this business is a fucking misfit. I just started TNA the other day. And me and Raven and Scott Hall and Conan were sitting, everyone's gone from lunch and we're still sitting at the table together. Kevin Nash walks up. He's like, what the fuck is this, an NA meeting? And that's what we were actually sitting there talking about, because now all of us are no longer doing that stuff, but it helps us sit there and talk about it and, and joke about, hey, man, we did this and blah, 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 because it makes you almost feel like you still are having fun. And the guys that can still do it and not get in trouble and not fuck themselves up, I mean, more power to them, but I just couldn't stop at a certain point. Like those somas, if I had two, it makes your body feel fine. You do get a little buzz, and there's always something. You're always, as much fun as we're supposed to be having because we're doing something that we love for a job. There's always something that, in the back of your head, like, oh man, I'm not getting used right. I'm probably gonna get finished up. I'm probably gonna do this. We're a strange bunch of people, So something that kind of levels you out, it makes you feel better and stuff. It's sometimes helpful, But it's just, if I have two summers, I'll take two. If I have 100, I'll take 100. I have 1,000, I'll take 1,000. I can't regulate myself.
Right. Now, as far as I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about drugs coming up, but as far as Tammy taking the drugs and getting into the scene, I mean, she wasn't really in the ring taking bumps or anything like that. She was, traveling, but it wasn't a crazy travel schedule. What do you think?
Well, it was a crazy travel schedule when it started, because we were still doing like 40-day runs, home for 3, gone for 30. But there was like pressure on her to be the top girl in the business, be a fucking 105 pounds, do everything fucking right. Look, like the old Stacy Keebler got heat or something a couple months ago. They wanted to do an appearance when she got to the building, and she's like, no, because the girls can't drive 3-4 hours, get to a building, and go straight and do a meet and greet, because they don't look the way they're going to look on TV when they get there, and that's pressure on you,
right.
And then plus you're around everybody else doing it, and your husband's in the room with you doing it. It rubs off.
Was Tammy doing stuff in WWE? I forgot what she told us when we did our interview.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, when you got to ECW, you were already into the drug scene and stuff like that. Is it true that Nicole Bass's husband was pretty much one of the guys that brought the heavy drugs around the locker room?
Um,
Or was it just pretty much it?
no, Nicole Bass's wife had some stuff, but we were never like a real heavy drug people. We were like, like a pain pill thing, and mostly the fucking somas were our deal. But yeah, but Bob Bass would come around with, like the New Bane and stuff like that. I mean, he always, if you needed something, he always had it.
Right. So what was your drug of choice? Would it be somas and?
Yeah, somas. That's for some reason that's the wrestler drug of choice for some reason, and I didn't. I mean, and it kills your pain better than Vicodins do. It gives you, a buzz that's kind of a happy feeling thing. But then it's like, after I stopped taking them for a while, I hurt myself, and probably like 4 months after I got back from Puerto Rico, I hadn't taken anything, and a guy had given me like 3 of them, and I didn't want to say how it'd be a dick, like, oh, I don't take them, get away from me. He was like, here, man, take it. I'm looking at him. It took me like a day. I'm like, man, am I going to be a real fucking scumbag if I take these now? I'm not going to be able to stop again. And, and I was like, you know what? I mean, fuck, I got to go to the gym. My neck hurts. If I just take one of them, it's not going to do anything. And I fucking took one. And before, I could take, like 6 or 8 before I go to the ring and just, like, feel good. I took, like, one and I started getting, like, a little whoa, and I just fucking threw the other 2 out because I was like, I didn't like the fucking whoa, but I knew in about 10 more minutes I would like it,
Right. As far as, let's see. In ECW, how out of control was the drug scene?
It was, I'll tell you this, I know, everybody, kayfabe, oh, I don't do this and that. I was riding with Taz for a while, and Taz does nothing. He drinks coffee. So if I had kept riding with Taz, I might never have ended up in this situation. If Woody hadn't gone ahead and called the police, it would never happened. But pretty much, everybody else had their thing of choice,
Right.
But when people are, falling off fucking ceilings through tables on fire, shit hurts.
Oh yeah.
What was the boys' opinion when, with Louis Piccoli dying and everything like that?
What's bad about it is, me and Louis were close long before we got WWF together, and then what happened to him, as hard as it should have hit us, we were all, crying and sad, and it's still, and it bothers you when you think about him. But as much as, like, right then, all of us, like Robin, Sabu, and myself that were that close to them, should have, let's never do this again. And, like, previous to him, like, Eddie Gilbert helped me out so much. And Buddy Landell called me one day, and, after we lost Eddie in Puerto Rico, that, too, should have been a wake-up call. But as bad as it was, you were like, well, damn. That's horrible. We lost a great friend, but, let's make sure we never take, 1,000 a day anymore.
Uh-huh.
Here, you want 5? And it's a sad thing. That's just the way it was. There has to be something that just clicks in you for whatever reason to make you want to stop or not be as stupid.
Did any of the veterans ever come up to you and say, "Hey, you got a problem? You need to stop"?
No, because
like
the difference.
Funk or something.
The difference is, it did cause me problems, but I think the fact that, for whatever reason, I got labeled as like the poster child of the fucked up wrestler. I think because like some guys were too big a names, you can't make an example out of them. Some guys nobody gives a shit about, so you can't make an example out of them. I was kind of right in the middle where, well, he's a guy supposed to be real good and supposed to be great, so we can use him as the example because it'll prove a point, but at the same time it won't fuck up business. I think that's why I was kind of used. But for some reason, after we started losing guys like Eddie and Louie and Art Barr, and the perception started to change, and the offices started to get nervous about it. But the veterans never said anything because, look, the veterans, that was the way it was back then. Everybody was partying constantly, so they couldn't go ahead and tell us don't do it because they were going ahead and
Right.
Like I just was with Terry a few weeks ago, and we were talking about stuff similar to that, and he's like, God damn, he's like, don't tell Vicky about Jesus Christ, and I goddamn 76, I almost hocked the NWA belt for some dadgum cocaine. Vicky would kick my ass if she knew. That's 30 years ago.
Right.
Like, just don't tell her. He's like, I just drink beer now. Everybody's done something. When in Smoky Mountain there was, like Ricky Morton and stuff like that is a heavy partier, and no one thought anything of it because, well, fuck, he's Ricky Morton. He could do whatever he wants to do and go out and still tear the house down. But for some reason, once the death started to hit, the people outside the business got on us more. So when the fans started hearing about it, because I'm sure everybody, it's not, common knowledge that, I mean, like, you read Dynamite Kid's
Yeah,
book
yeah.
when he had to go up to the room and get Terry to go to the bus, and Terry had like one boot on, thrown up all over himself, and was, running around naked and drunk and stuff. And he was the NWA World Champion at the time. And he told Dynamite Kid, how you come to be an NWA champion? You gotta be a huge fuck up. I mean, the fans didn't know that back then because there was no internet, there was no stuff. So, but once stuff started to get out, and people need something to chant at you when they become smarter. So that was part of the problem too. The veterans could never say anything to us because they all did it. They just were able to hide it better.
Do you think that pretty much the wrestlers have been the same? It's just because of the internet and smart fans and everything. It's everybody knows about it, but it was probably like with the drinking and all that in the 70s and 80s, like the Ric Flair and everything like that.
I mean, like my grandfather told me stories. Him and Freddie Blassie and Fuji and stuff would do. I mean, he was out of his mind. I was on my 13th birthday. He had a show in Old Tappan, New Jersey, and brought me to the hotel afterwards. I remember Sergeant Slaughter was there, like Larry, Bam Bam, Ted Petty, and guys. And he was I'm 13 years old that night, and he was trying to get me a rat. I'm 13 years old. This is my grandfather now,
right?
And so they were all.
Look at the Von Erichs.
Yeah, it was a whole. Once everybody really started to find out about the inner workings of stuff, and people got, I don't know if smart is the right word, but that's what we use. That's what kind of started that whole ball rolling.
I was going to actually ask you, do you think you guys were, you and Tammy were scapegoated by Paulie at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
He like when he had Tammy do that
TNN thing.
I was going to ask you about that.
I mean, it was like a heavy sell on it. He was like, man, this will be great. He was like, how is it going to be great? He was like, well, he'll either make you a sympathetic figure and tell your story and stuff, but for some people just didn't want to believe what you said was true, and when it was, when people get back on you, he's talking about, stuff. He was like, listen, I'm starting to get too heavy, just tell me to back off. And she talked about stuff that she doesn't want to talk about, like stuff with her niece and her mom and all that kind of crap. And and he aired it, and like I saw Cornette's shoot interview when I was in Puerto Rico. Pablo Marquez had a tape of the thing you did with Cornette.
Okay.
And we were staying at Pablo's for a while. He had no TV except fucking one Puerto Rican channel. So we watched him Cornette since it was so long. We watched it 4 or 5 times a week. And he said he was like, like Paulie must have not been a friend to us because why'd you do that to a friend? But he asked us beforehand if we do it, and we said, yeah. And he said, well, it could either be great, or it can blow up in our faces. But the key word was our faces. I figured that meant him too. And when it just kind of backfired, it just kind of backfired on us.
Looking back on it, would you have not wanted to do that?
Well, looking back on it, if we weren't really trying to be straight, we were just trying to be straight enough that we would not get in any fucking trouble and be labeled as fuck-ups. We still didn't want to be straight. We still wanted to fucking party, but just we didn't want anybody to know about it.
Right.
Had I truthfully been wanting to be straight then, I still would have gone ahead and done it. But again, that was so many years ago, and you're not as mature as you are as you get older. So if I know now what I knew then, I would still do it, but I would do it smarter. Then I was just half the time you're fucked up, and then when you're awake, you're under fucking Paulie's spell. So there was not one point in the day when you were in your right frame of mind.
Right.
Speaking of drugs and other drugs, steroids, you can look at different guys in ECW with their physiques and everything. What's your opinion on them?
Well, people ask about steroids in wrestling. I don't know anybody. Even now, fucking Spike looks kind of good. I don't know of anybody who's not on. I'm seriously, I don't know one fucking person that's not. And people. You can look at the obvious people who are, but they're on a lot more than just steroids. They're on fucking growth and a lot more steroids and train a lot harder. I remember in Memphis, somebody mailed me, fell from a pier. Remember the Spider, one of the headbangers?
Yes. Yeah.
He mailed me some stuff down to Memphis, and Bill Dundee's wanting to buy half it off me. And Bill Dundee, he was kind of he was a stout little fella, 5'5", but got the biggest 5'5" you ever seen. But he would just do the fucking that wheel, Bob Backlund wheel, and do the little rubber things. But he's not a guy. When you think of steroids, you don't immediately think of superstar Bill Dundee.
Right.
But he was, everybody is.
What's your opinion of his son? You've known him probably a lot.
Jamie's fucking good.
Yeah.
I guess I want to say Jamie's great, but again, that's wrong because you're a fuck up like Jamie. But when Jamie came to WWF, that's when I was going to the TVs, and we would walk into the lunchroom, and it was me, Jamie, Wolfie, and Tracy Smothers, and we'd get our lunch thing, and we'd walk toward a table, and we were like the fucking Heat Clique. We'd come in, and people would be like, huh. From them. The day Paulie and we were in Delaware somewhere, and Paulie and Tommy and a couple other guys came to the TV, and that day they had passed out memos the week before saying we don't want the guys wearing any other wrestling shirts people were doing run-ins wearing like Gold's Gym shirts and stuff, and because the guy in California used to like hook up all the boys with shirts and let us train and stuff. But then there was heat between him and somebody, so like we don't want you wearing his Gold's Gym stuff on TV anymore. We don't want you wearing anything with like a name brand symbol like a Nike or stuff, and no other company's wrestling stuff. Going through town because it looks bad. Now there's like the dress code. Then they didn't want somebody in WWF wearing somebody else's shirt because why would you wear that shirt if you're a WWF guy? You're supposed to be a superstar. And Jamie and Wolfie were only being used on Raw, and I loved them. And I was getting to bring in guys that I wanted to bring in. So I brought in Tracy, Tommy Rich, Tommy Rogers. I brought in Jamie and Wolfie, so they get the memo, and it was mailed to them. And we're going to Raw. They came that weekend with us in ECW, and then that Monday we're all going to the Raw together. So we get there, and Jamie and Wolfie, Tommy Dreamer pulls up. He goes, "Shit, you got shirts?" Go in Tommy's trunk, and they're just putting on. Jamie had like an Eliminator shirt, and Wolfie fucking got whatever, like a team tag or something. And they walk in, and somebody looks at him. They're like we just got a memo saying don't do that. Or like Arnold Skull or something. It's like, look at these guys. They're like fuck y'all, fuck you, we're fucking ACW. We let these guys. That was just the way they were. That's kind of what I was too. We just looked for fucking problems. We thought it was cool, but I mean, it took me this long to finally start making a comeback. And Jamie Dundee, I talked to him about a year ago. He called me over to my mom's house. I got the number. I have no idea. I visited my mom. And she goes, "There's a Dundee on the phone." I figure it's just somebody ribbed me. I go, "Hello." And he goes, "Fuck, Candido, what's going on?" I'm like, "Jamie, how do you get this number?" He's like, "I know how to find you, motherfucker." I said, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Well, I'm out of jail." Well, that's good. I was like, "You still working?" "Sometimes, but I got a great gimmick now. You know what I'm doing? Daycare." Who the hell dropped off their kid at I haven't spoke to him since. I don't know how well that is going, but
what was the drug scene like in WWE?
It was not as. It was pretty much as rampant as in ECW, but in ECW we were so vocal about it, and WWF, people were a little bit quieter about it, but everybody was doing something. There it was more or less some was to go to bed or Viking because you're hurt. Where in ECW there was a lot more stuff. The schedule wasn't as bad. The bumps were worse, and it was a lot more accepted. You didn't have to try and hide anything. Everybody just did what they wanted, right, looking out in the open.
Did anybody actually ever refuse to work with you guys? I guess because you were out of it in ECW at all?
No, that's one thing I never did. I never went to the fucking ring fucked up ever. I mean, there was a couple guys like Shane didn't want to work with Sandman because he was drunk when he went in there. I've worked with Sandman 1,000 times, never in ECW, except maybe one or two little runs together. Right. And we never even really talked when we were in ECW. There was no heat. We just were in different little groups. And we were in Michigan a couple years ago, like 2-3 years ago. And also we just they made us, for some reason, Sabu's cousin there, the Captain Eddie, made me and Sandman the fiery babyface tag team. And we just kind of just clicked, and we're like, why did we never hang out together? And there, he's like, because fucking Shane was a dick. He didn't like me. We just, and Sandman, I got the groin surgery, it was probably 2 years ago now. And I had worked for Frank Goodman that night. He's like, "Who do you want to work with?" "I work with Sandman." He said, "You just got groin surgery today at noon. You're going to work with Sandman?" I said, "Because I know he'll take care of me." I said, "He's dangerous only to himself." That's like him and Sabu both. But they'll take care of you, no matter what. But no one ever, I never went to the ring fucked up in ECW. At least not more fucked up than anybody else was. And there'd be nobody there saying, "I don't want to work with them," because there was nobody that was totally straight beside Taz. Anyway, and me and Taz never had a problem with each other.
Right.
I think you wrestled Sabu one time in New Orleans. Is that real hot building? Didn't you injure your ear or something?
No, the ear was in Boston. Sabu had his spike in his boot. He was spiking me on the floor. Went to put it into his boot, and it kind of came out his tongue, his laces. And him and Rob wanted to do the Rolling Thunder on us. Sabu came over the top. And instead of doing the Arabian leg drop, he did the Arabian Soma. My toe got caught and fall. As it fell on me, he came out with his boot, hit me in the ear, and the spike was sticking out. And it cut my ear. It was hanging by my earlobe. Ooh. And I knew something bad had happened because it hurt, but I didn't know it was that bad. So I just started trying to do my Terry Funk flop around like a fucking fish. And I looked over and I saw Tammy on top of the wall, the Revere dog track. Yeah. Everybody's peeking out. I saw her eyes I grabbed my ear, I'm like, I feel blood squirting out. Rob and Sabu put me and Lance on the table, head to head like this. And I'm holding my ear going, oh shit. Lance just looks over very calmly with his tremendous personality. He goes, "What's wrong?" I said, "I think my ear is off my head." He goes, "Well, get off the table, dude." So I just got up and walked into the back, and then I fell down. Then I was scared. Right. At first I was like, oh, it hurt, but no big deal. Well, then when I know something's wrong, then I'm a big pussy. I'm like, oh my God, my ear left my head. So, we had the fake EMTs that were always there in ECW. Well, Balls comes running thinking it's the fake ones that are on me, but they're really MTs were there. I don't know, I guess a dog got hurt on the racetrack or something. So they come on, they're looking at my ear. Balls comes over, just, his match has been over for 2 hours. He's still fucking juice pouring out of his head. 400 pounds sits on my chest. Get away!